There being 6:30 on February 19th, I'm going to start the Zoning Board of Appeals with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
I guess, I don't know, we all rolled over and said, but.
under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20F. This meeting is being recorded. Petition tonight, 0 Westport Lakes Road, continue hearing on application of Pine Ridge Estates LLC and Bradford Deed for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Law 40B for a development of Westport Lakes Drive consisting of 38 single-family homes on individual lots which are to contain 2 or 3 bedrooms, with 10 of those homes being designated as affordable deed-restricted homes. The subject property is located at 0 Westport Lakes Road and is shown on Assessor's Map 31, lots 3B, 3C, and 4G. And again, this is a continuation, so in the way that we will run the meeting is I'll have the petitioner come up. Actually, tonight is going to be discussing the traffic aspects of this project. So I'll have our consultant come up and give a summary of what he found looking at the traffic report. After we get through with that, I'll open it up to the floor for comments on traffic. So if you want to do an opening mark, otherwise I'm going to have Pat come up and give a summary. But again, we're going to do traffic only tonight.
Do we want to wait for,
Actually, we have, yeah, why don't you try calling him?
He's an alternate anyway, so we have another alternate here.
But
that's,
for the sake of, for continuation.
Yeah.
Anyway, voting on, I assume, this is going to be another continuation. This is
of
going
course,
to be for several times.
of course, Mr. Chairman. My own,
So voting on this will be myself, Roger Menard, Constance Gee, Janice Day, Ray Elias, and Cynthia Kozekowicz will be voting on when we get to the point of a continuation. Because obviously, this is going to be continued probably
course.
several more times.
of course. I prefer to wait if we could, or find out what's going on with.
Yes,
We're also missing Jerry.
I'm sorry?
Jerry's not here as well.
right, he won't be
So
here.
you know, Jerry's.
Jerry's not going to be here.
He's
No.
sick.
Oh, so you wait, oh.
Jerry's at home watching this on TV.
So don't say anything.
Chris,
Hi, Jerry.
what I'd like to do at this point in time is,
Can I hang on a second? I want to make sure if George is going to be here, then I will wait for
Okay.
him. Because,
Then he's fully read in.
yes. No, okay, go ahead.
so you can't reach him? Can't reach him?
So name,
Sure.
Announce yourself.
Paul Cusson from Delphic Associates. We are the 40B consultants for the development. And there's been some correspondence since the last meeting. A traffic report was prepared by our consultant, Jeffrey Dirk, who is here tonight. That has been submitted to the board. That report has been reviewed by your consulting engineer, and they had made some comments, and those comments have been answered by Jeff. But before we get into, at the pleasure of the board, I thought that maybe we would have Jeff do an overview of the traffic, unless you really
no,
want.
that's okay. You can do your overview, and then I'll have our consultant
Sure.
comment, give his perspective on it.
Sure.
So,
At this point in time, however, since the last meeting, the development team has hired Chris Agostino. I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris, want to come up? Chris Agostino is an expert in the area of land use and also an expert in the area of 40B. Chris and I have worked together. And Chris, if you want to say a couple of words,
what would be your role?
come on up.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christopher
Name and
Agostino.
address.
Christopher Agostino, counsel for the applicant, an attorney at Roberto Israel and Weiner, 255 State Street, Boston, Mass. And Paul just wanted to introduce me as another member of the development team, but we look forward to hearing the presentation on traffic this evening.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Jeff, I'll have Jeff Dirk come up and just say a few words about the development, a quick overview.
Yep.
And then maybe the board may have some comments, and then over to your consultant to answer any questions. Jeff is with Vanessa and Associates.
So, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you heard by way of...
Name and address.
Yes. By the way of introductions, as you heard, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa and Associates. We're the transportation consultants on the project. Our place of business is in Andover, Massachusetts. So I will give you kind of a high-level overview of the transportation study so you can hear from your review consultant, but happy to go into any specific details that you might have on the traffic study. You might want to ask your consultant some of these details. We did have the benefit of a peer review, so just kind of some of the history as it relates to what we've undertaken as a part of the study or for the project. We conducted an initial transportation impact assessment in December of last year, so toward the end of last year. Published that assessment, and you've since had a peer review done of that study, and you'll hear from your review consultant shortly. In essence, as it relates to their review of our transportation analysis, the findings that you'll hear from their consultant is that all of the technical methodology that we use in assessing the impacts of the project, they've done their job as the peer review consultant to make sure that the study meets the required standards that the Commonwealth sets through the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. They set the standards we have to follow in preparing these transportation assessments in terms of the ways that we go about collecting the data, what type of data is collected, how we adjust that data, given that Westport's a seasonal community, so we want to look at seasonality of the traffic volumes, how we look at estimating the amount of traffic the project will produce. Obviously, the project's going to produce additional traffic on the roadways, and so we need to assess what that impact is. And then lastly, looking at what the impacts of the project are. And when we're looking at the impacts of the project, it's looking at delays on the roadway. So as everyone's familiar, driving on roads and coming up to intersections, generally you experience delays at stop signs. You need to stop to wait for traffic to clear so that you can then pull out at an intersection. The other thing that you see is queuing. So if we have backups, say, getting off the highway, getting off of Route 88, there may be backups that happen in front of you, cars waiting to turn onto the roadway. So we look at the backups that happen, or those queues before and after the project's traffic, and we see whether the project has increased delays or increased queuing at those intersections. So we've undertaken that as a part of our analysis, and again, your review consultant has taken a look at it. So what you hear in terms of the findings of our assessment, the project is expected to produce somewhere between 30 and 40 additional peak hour trips. So if you're looking at the roadway as it exists today, we're going to be adding about 30 or 40 trips over the course of an hour. So that amount of traffic is spread out over a 1 hour period. And when we looked at what the impacts of that additional traffic was going to be, what we saw in terms of delays at intersections was the project didn't cause any increases in delay that caused appreciable queuing. So if you looked at what happens out on the roadways today, you're not going to see much difference before and after the project's traffic, both at present but also looking 7 years in the future. So the change before and after the project, it didn't show any material impacts, and you'll hear from your consultant that they concur with those findings. There were two things that your consultant had asked us to come back with some additional information on. The first was looking at the sight lines coming out of the property. So if you've had a presentation of the site plan itself, as you're exiting the driveway and you're looking to the left or right, there's vegetation that exists. And so as you look at our transportation assessment, we've recommended that some trimming of the vegetation take place. That vegetation trimming would either occur within the project site or what's known as the public right-of-way. So it doesn't happen on private property. It occurs either within the site. Most of it, I believe, is within the site and would be taken care of as a part of the construction of the driveway. But what your consultant asked us to show is what's known as a site triangle. So the site triangle is we pick a point in the driveway where the driver would be sitting, and then we make a triangle looking to the left or right to the point where we extend from the driver's eye out into the roadway and then connect it back, and that creates a triangle. Within those triangle areas, that's where we want to make sure there's no objects placed that would inhibit sight lines. So that was asked to be provided so that as you look at the site plans, you can verify that what needs to take place is under the control of the applicant in terms of clearing vegetation. So we provided that plan to your consultant. The second thing was asked was for us to look at motor vehicle crashes at the off-ramp from Route 88, and it was actually the southbound off-ramp. So as we looked at the number of crashes that were happening at the intersection of Route 177 at the Route 88 southbound off-ramp, the number of crashes that were happening was disproportionate to the volume of traffic going through the intersection. So based on the volume of traffic that goes through there, we would expect a lower incidence of crashes than is actually occurring there. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's an issue as it relates to safety, but what it does mean is you need to take a more deeper dive and look at what's actually happening at that intersection. So what we did was we requested crash reports from the Westport Police Department. So the police department took the time to pull all of the crash records for the most recent 5-year period for those ramps and provided them to us. What that information is, hopefully none of you have had the experience of having to fill out a crash report at an intersection, but as you're filling out that, as much of a pain as it is to actually do it, for transportation professionals, what it provides to us is your feedback in terms of what happened to you at the intersection. Which direction were you traveling? And then what happened as a result of the crash? Did someone rear-end you as you were getting off the highway? Was it you slid on ice? Things like that. So the crash reports give us that type of information so we can actually look at what's happening at the off-ramp intersection. So again, we use crash data that was provided by the Westport Police Department. And as we looked at the crashes at that intersection, there were 14 crashes over the 5-year period. 8 of those crashes were people coming off the ramp and turning right, and I'm sure you're very familiar with that ramp. And this is not uncommon when you've got an off-ramp where it's yield control and it's kind of you slip around to the right. And what it is the vehicle that's following thinks the vehicle in front of them left, because we're all focused on the traffic that's traveling, in this case, would be going westbound. You think the car in front of you left, but it didn't, because there was a car coming and they stopped short and then someone rear-ends them. So of the 14 crashes, that was 8 of those crashes. The rest of the crashes, it was a combination of people. It was actually single vehicle crashes on the ramp, so people hitting some of the signs that were there. Didn't involve other vehicles. There was also, I think, 3 crashes on 177. There was one where a vehicle was passing on the right and got struck, so that was a citation. The other crashes were just motorists not paying attention to what was going on at the intersection itself. So, the deeper dive into that says, yes, the number of crashes are disproportionate, but what's actually happening is just people not paying attention to the car that's in front of them getting off the ramp. And I think, as I said, it's something not unexpected. So we provided that information to your consultant, and I know that was actually recent, so I don't know if they've had a chance to look at that. But those were the only 2 comments that we had on the transportation study. The other thing you'll see is recommendations in the study. We always provide some recommendations. Mostly they relate to the site plans, and the site plans that have been developed for the project, they've incorporated all of those recommendations. So sidewalks, width of streets, dimensions of driveways. So we want to make sure the driveways are sufficiently long so vehicles don't stick out into the street. So we provide those as guidance, and I know those have all been incorporated into the site plan, and your consultant has had a chance to look at those recommendations. So that's a very high-level overview of the traffic study. There are traffic counts in the traffic study as well, so I can talk about those vehicle speed measurements as well. We've taken into account all of those existing conditions as a part of our analysis, and again, your consultant has verified that we've collected the data and assessed it appropriately. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now. You probably want to hear from your consultant, and then I'll be happy to engage in any questions or follow-up that you might have or your consultant may have.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Pat?
Hi, so my name is Patrick Bradley. I'm a traffic engineer at Chapel Engineering. Our office is based out of Marlboro, 201 Boston Post Road. So we completed a review of the traffic study that was provided by VAI. Jeff kind of gave a large overview of, all the points in the project, so I don't feel the need to necessarily go through all those again, but in terms of the way that the study was completed, it followed all DOT guidelines in terms of data collection, getting crash data, speed measurements, all those kind of nitty-gritty details that you need for the base of the study. So all those were done under DOT standards. In terms of actual traffic generation for the development itself, the volumes are very low. There's not very many impacts on the study roadway or the intersections. As Jeff pointed out, it's very low volume expected during the peak hours for this kind of development. As he had stated, there were 2 points that we'd like to get more information on when it came to the actual study itself, one of which was that sightline triangle, which I did see in the response letter that we had received, and it shows that there's clear sightlines and identifies any areas within that triangle that there should be no obstructions in terms of like larger vegetation or signage, stuff like that. In terms of the crash data, he had mentioned that he did get reports from the police department. I have not seen those, the actual diagrams or anything like that, so we'd like to just see those specifically. They were not part of the response letter that we did receive earlier, so that's just one thing that we would like to take a look at, just to confirm what he was saying in terms of driver inattentiveness being the issue for those accidents. But just an overall statement, the report follows DOT guidelines. There are minor impacts to the surrounding areas, and overall, it should really have no impacts. So, but I can answer any direct questions if there are any in terms of any parts
I
of the
mean,
project.
you looked at the sight line from the Gulf Road to West Lake Road,
Yes.
getting on and off of the 40B project.
Yes.
Is there anything in there that describes how to make sure that those sight lines are in fact cleared and remain cleared?
In terms of that, you mean how do they reinforce that?
They
or-
showed, I mean, that there's they talked about the triangle of sight. But is there anything in there that talks about what kind of vegetation or no vegetation or?
I'll let Jeff answer the question. I think his recommendation was that any areas that are in the triangle, if, on our property, be cleared and maintain that. So that could, turn it over to Chris, but that could be done in a way of a condition of the permit, and also could be further identified, I guess, on the engineered plans.
Yeah,
to
because,
be
I mean,
sure.
that's-
Yeah, that's a,
That's certainly the major, coming
Sure.
on and off of your development.
Yep.
Is going to be, one of certainly the major aspects of safety, getting on and off of your road.
from our road onto Westport Lakes Road.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's, yes.
So, not only making sure there's a clear line of sight, but making sure that in fact it's consistently, because I've
stays
seen,
that
say,
way.
okay, you put, small shrubs in there, and then 10 years later, they're trees. So, it's, so how do you manage that? Other than just saying you're gonna continue trimming,
Well, no,
which
it's a
doesn't happen.
condition, it would be a condition of the permit. So therefore, if there was a violation at some point in time, it's an enforcement issue.
It may be-
Yeah.
So I just add, and we also serve as peer reviewers for municipalities as well. And so one of the things that is often requested is the site triangles, as Paul was saying, they're shown on the site plans, so that when you endorse the plans, the site triangle, and I'll, actually, if you just bear with me for a minute. So what we do is, this is the site triangle plan that, that
Right.
we provide.
Yes.
What you see on there is, we actually have notes on the plan that address exactly what you said. So what we usually ask is this be included in the site plan set, so when you do get to a point where you endorse the site plan, these notes are shown on there, and it's enforceable. So if for some reason there was a sightline issue, the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer has this plan, because it's a part of the record set, they can enforce the requirement to keep it clear. But by having it in the site plan set that you endorse, it doesn't get lost, it stays with the site.
Okay.
So for all the area within the site triangle, no, I'm asking a question. All the area within the site triangle, except for the road portion, is that owned by the applicant?
So
Is
see
it-
the lines that are.
Yeah,
this
is that owned by the applicant?
The applicant owns the land on this side of that line. The other side of the line is within the public way or an easement area. In fact, this is a private way. So
It's a private way.
So then this is within the easement area, and then they would have rights to be able to clear that as being someone who owns property along the road itself.
Right, and then, they would also then be required to maintain it.
Correct.
Okay.
And the notes say on here exactly what the chairman was mentioning, which is says, no object shall be placed in this area, the yellow areas that exceed 2.5 feet in height, and that's under all conditions. So you couldn't have something placed in that area that would.
So you're not even going to have a stop sign there?
Correct, there's gonna be a stop sign. Well, there will be a stop sign there, yes.
Okay.
There has to be.
There has to be a stop sign.
There has to
So,
be.
so how does that affect your line of sight?
Oh, it doesn't. So when you think, the stop sign itself,
Yeah,
when you think about like a stop sign itself, it's just a small pole.
Yes.
And the sign itself is up high. The
It's high.
sign height is 7 foot to the bottom. All signs are supposed to be mounted at a 7-foot height so that if you can walk under them, you don't hit your head on them.
yes, I know, but I mean, when I come off of my street, the stop sign is in the way.
So then it's not installed properly. So this one is installed per standards and we've cited.
Well, it really depends upon the pitch of the road as well, because if the stop sign is here and the road's got a pitch up, it can impact, and this road is pretty straight,
Right, so-
flat.
So the
Yeah,
height
that's
is,
right.
the height is relative to the elevation of the pavement of the driveway. Because the 2.5 feet, the driver's eye is assumed to be 3.5 feet above the pavement surface. So all of the measurements are taken from the surface elevation of the driveway. So once that driveway elevation is set, no objects within that side triangle area, we always say it's 2.5 feet. The reason for that, when you think about this, when you come in, when they're building the road and it comes in to intersect Westport Lakes Drive, it needs to be at the same elevation. So the driveway elevation at Westport Lakes Drive is going to be roughly at about the same elevation. So when we measure up 2.5 feet above, we're looking to a car that's coming at you along Westport Lake Drive. As you said, it's straight, relatively flat. side.
Relatively flat.
Right, so we don't have a lot of change in grade that would affect that, but you are right, the measurements are taken from the surface elevation of the driveway, which should be pretty close to the surface elevation of the intersecting street, otherwise they couldn't intersect each other.
Okay, I mean, you went into a lot of detail about that intersection.
Correct.
What about the safety of the rest of your 40B development?
So the roads are designed to function safely, and the width of the roads comply with.
Lines of sight for coming out of your driveways, and there's a bunch of curves that you have, there's cul-de-sacs or whatever. So, Pat, have you even looked at that part of it?
In terms of safety analysis, not exactly, no.
Okay,
So those all need to be looked at. What I would suggest is that the speeds within the site, you can't, this is probably the worst case in terms of the sight lines. When you're driving within the site, you do want the curves and everything because it's gonna keep the speeds down. So if you're going 25 miles an hour, that's probably the fastest you'd be able to go. The sight line for 25 miles an hour is generally, you're talking about sight lines needing to be somewhere between 80 to 100 feet. So they're not very long because they're gonna be going slow, but I would also, fire trucks need to maneuver, but you do want some geometry in there to slow the vehicles down as they're going through. They want to keep the speeds down.
okay, so that still doesn't answer my question. Have you looked at the safety on your part of the,
We have, and that's why we provided recommendations to make sure that it's safe.
because you have a T there where
Right.
that branches off. You have sight lines there to make sure that people going back and forth have enough vision to not slam into each other.
Correct. So the recommendation says that sight lines similar to what you see here have to be provided within the site. We're also putting that intersection under stop sign control. So people are gonna come in and stop and then be able to look left or right there. There's no surface topography
Okay.
in there that would cause any issue, but again, that's this issue of don't place any objects that would exceed 2.5 feet in height would apply anywhere within the project site.
Anywhere within the project site,
Where the
okay.
site, where an intersection.
And that goes on documentation somewhere.
Should go on the site plans. That's where I would suggest that your review consultant can, make a recommendation. We typically want a note on the site plan so that, again, it's a part of the record that you endorse rather than saying, comply with all the requirements of the traffic study, and then the traffic study is not connected to the site plans, and it ends up in a different file in the site plans. But your zoning enforcement officer, if there's an issue, they're gonna pull the site plans that you endorsed and then follow those, so the note should be on the site plan.
And as the engineering is evolving, we will make certain that that is on the plans that hopefully eventually will be endorsed by the board. In addition, what you're concerned about, maintaining that area vegetation-wise and so forth, we could include that in the HOA documents to be sure that it would be the responsibility of the HOA.
Okay, that gets off to a whole other issue here, is that you're starting off with a very small number of houses you're building, in which there's a
Oh,
very...
we could increase it if you'd like.
No, I mean, you have 38, but you're going to build, 10 to start with.
That's not what it says in the engineering report. They're saying that it's not going to be done piecemeal.
Yeah, it says it's gonna be done all at once.
Yep. The
Well,
Carlin's
not-
response to the site plan said that it was all going to be done at once. They got to find the piece of paper.
Oh,
Just do it.
okay.
So my question was, what is it? Because I know earlier in our early meetings, you said you were going to do a piecemeal.
Piecemeal.
But then in Farland's response, they specifically said that it was going to be done all at once.
Let me clarify. What we said was that, yes, we're not going to be building all of the 38 houses at the same time. Okay, so what will be happening is that as they go in and put in the utilities and clear the roadway and so forth, that's not going to be done in phases. The rough road and so forth. We'll be most likely.
Can you back that up again?
Sure. So what'll happen is that the Gulfview Lane going up, okay, and then you've got a road going to the left and right. All of that would be grubbed in and brought to a point where it's ready for binder course.
Okay, all right.
The houses we're not saying we're gonna be building all of the houses at the same time. So it's tentatively that the houses would be starting most likely on the left and be going as the houses are sold and so forth. We'll be building 2 or 3, 4 houses initially, and as the houses, like any development, you continue building the houses.
Okay, so it is essentially, it's a semi-phased approach. You rough in the whole
Yes.
street, and then you build as you go. But at some point, I mean, it's possible that you just stop. I mean, that's what happened with Westlake Drive. They just built so many houses and then didn't build anymore.
Because they couldn't sell anymore.
So,
I guess
Well,
what's the contingency?
I'm
if
not
you don't
sure
sell
about
it?
Westport Lakes Road, whether they didn't want to sell it or they couldn't sell them. I don't know what the condition was there.
What's your plan?
So it is our intent and the developers that we would be building in accordance to market acceptance. We're not going to intentionally stop and build one house a year or one house every, a couple of houses. We don't make any money like that, and you go broke, is really what happens. So it's the intent to continue right through. Now, whether it's going to take, a year and a half, 2 years, or 2.5 years to build all the houses, I don't know. But it's not going to take 10 years. You can put that in writing if you like,
what I'm concerned about, and this is from a safety
Sure,
aspect, from a traffic standpoint, is, and for some period of time, you're gonna have a very, very small homeowner base. So who manages all this stuff
The
while that
developer.
is happening?
The developer. The developer is, what happens is that when you start selling the first 2 or 3 houses, there's an HOA fee. Every buyer has to pay so much per month. Well, there's not a lot of money on day one.
Right.
So what happens is that when we do the closings, we collect in advance 3 months' operating costs. So that goes into the kitty as the house is built. So in the beginning, it's the developer's responsibility, for example, snow removal and those kinds of things. There's not enough money in that budget. But hopefully, the budget is established in such a way that at some point in time, what's called a turnover event in the documents, the turnover is turned over to the HOA. Then it becomes totally their responsibility. And usually that's at about 70% of the total units.
But up until that point then,
The developer,
is going to maintain the road, maintain the cutting down of the, the lines of sight and
the
manage-
septic system,
And the septic systems.
Yes.
Until you get to the point where the homeowners. can
is a
take it.
turnover event, correct.
Okay.
I think when, in one of our earlier meetings, either the first or second, Mr. Farland, who actually isn't here tonight, surprising,
His engineer is here.
yeah, said that typically in developments that he had done, the developer funds, each lot, let's say if each lot is assessed at a $100 HOA, that the developer funds that until those lots are sold. So therefore, there's not an empty kitty.
Yeah, that,
Is
it's,
that-
we have typically done it differently, okay? The developer is, so what happens is that according to HOA and according to the legal documents, okay, that money has to be set into a separate account. So as you start collecting money, you put that money into a separate account. When the units are 70% completed, it's turned over, so that account becomes the HOA. In the meantime, the developer is not kicking in $100 a month.
But they do
The developer,
care sort of-
let me finish. The developer is taking care of that responsibility.
Okay. And that's something we could put in
Sure,
the decision.
yes.
That they.
And you can
That's-
also have the opportunity to review, or have counsel review our HOA documents.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah, we have no problem with that.
yep. Is there any outstanding issues that we need to consider for traffic analysis?
The only thing right now would just be to get the actual police reports from VAI. If they say that they have them, we just need to see them, just confirm what they have. That was
Jeff,
the
you
only
can send
other, only outstanding. item.
So you just want to verify that,
Correct, yeah.
what the traffic incidents were.
Correct, yeah.
Was that in Jeff's report?
In the report, it
No,
said,
the supplement report he just sent out.
as of today,
No, it was, a few days ago.
the report I have is from the 7th, and it said that you reached out to the police department, and once you receive the reports, you will follow up with something. I don't have the,
And it did that.
I just don't have the follow-up. I don't know if it was sent to,
That was done. Jeff, is that correct? Jeff still there?
You would have just received it yesterday at the earliest. So that's the.
Okay.
So take a look.
okay, yes.
So he'll review.
It's in your inbox.
Yeah, we'll review and, just kind of respond, just let you know if it's,
Just to
if
verify
it's-
that.
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
Have there been police reports for accidents on, have you looked at police reports for the accidents on Westlake Drive?
The police department actually provided us crash reports for all of the intersections.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yes, all of them. The only one that required further review was the off-ramps. There's generally a low incidence of crashes within the area itself that didn't, as I said, as we're looking, there are crashes, but it's not disproportionate to the volume of traffic going through the intersections. The other measure that we look at is the state publishes high crash locations, and that's based on a different metric. What they look at is the severity of crashes. So they don't, these little fender benders, the state's not so much concerned about that. What they are concerned about is locations where there's either fatalities happening or a large number of personal injury crashes. If there's locations with fatalities or a large number of personal injury crashes, they get published as the state's high crash location list. There's no high crash locations in this area. So it's a different way of looking at crashes. The state's more concerned about addressing personal injury and fatalities and focusing on that and spending money there rather than the fender benders. We're concerned with all of the crashes, and so that's why, we don't have any high crash locations as it relates to the state, but we do have a location where there's a lot of fender benders. So we wanted to see, typical things, signs, pavement markings, and trimming of vegetation We try to see if things like that could address what's happening. This one is just driver error, because as you said, it's, if you look at it, you just see people just rear-ending coming off of that ramp.
I know they also went into other upcoming projects in the neighboring cities or towns.
We did,
And there were some, but they were like in Dartmouth
and Tiverton.
right, in Tiverton.
Correct.
So that's a fair distance away.
Right. Westport identified 2 projects, but they were also far removed from this area that they weren't going to add any additional traffic. But your review consultant said close enough to Dartmouth or Tiverton, see what's going on there. So we reached out as well to those communities.
Okay, so we just, you just need to get the reports.
Yeah,
And-
you just give us time to just review the report. If it was sent yesterday, yeah, I don't believe it was fully reviewed, so.
I mean, is there anything else you need to look at from a safety and traffic standpoint?
In terms of traffic, no, it was, we didn't have many issues with the study itself. It was all performed under DOT standards, like we had said, so there's
Can you just sort of, for the audience, just sort of give an overview of, of actually the process you went through, so that they can get a feel for, for the effort that was done?
Sure. So we review each step of the report as, they present to us. That starts with identifying project location, or, study locations, which is, nearby intersections that would be affected by the traffic. And so we confirm those as locations that would need to be studied. Traffic data is recorded at all of those intersections, which we review. They look at seasonal and previously COVID adjustments to adjust that data if it needs to be. Those were all done for this project for those volumes, and we agreed with that analysis. After that, we also look at, obviously the crash data at those locations to see if there's any high crash volumes, like the southbound exit ramp being one of them, where it has a high crash volume, basically. After that, we also look at the actual analysis of the intersection. So you look at the level of service is what it's called. Basically, it looks at the volume of cars going into, vehicles in general going into intersections, the rate that they come in, and basically it breaks it all down into level of service, like volume. So it's listed from A to F. Anything over D is really considered acceptable. E is okay sometimes. F is obviously a failure of the system. It usually means that either the intersection's backing up too much, or especially for like a signalized intersection, if like the timings are not appropriate, you'll see like large queues and stuff like that. So we analyze the reports that they have given to us, usually it's a Synchro report. It's a type of software. So we analyze that data that they've provided to us to confirm that, that they've added the proper amount of traffic to those intersections, given the traffic generation rates given by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE. They provide a large database full of studies that they've committed for different types of developments, like residential, retail, commercial, stuff like that. And so they used the proper ITE codes for that, for single-family housing. And they also then used the U.S. Census data for Journey to Work, which basically, it's a database for the entire U.S., but you can break it down by certain towns, and it gives you volumes of the people who live in that town and where they work, basically, and that kind of gives you an idea of potential distribution models for the traffic. So for a residential development, obviously people come to and from work, so it's a journey to work model, so we can get the distribution there, so we can confirm those as well. So basically, we just kind of go down the list of things that they have provided, and we just double check and make sure that it follows along with the guidelines.
But does it go down into looking at things like when school is let out?
So,
Because I know, in this particular, the bus isn't going to go down that road, so, anybody with kids are going to be down at the intersection of 177 and Westlake Road.
right. So,
Is that impacted at all?
so there are 2 analysis periods that are done. It's the AM and the PM peak hours. The AM peak hour is between 7 and 9 AM, and the PM is between 4 and 6 PM. Typically, we're just looking at the vehicle trips from the houses based off that ITE data. We don't necessarily take into account, bus trips or something like that, but usually, especially for a neighborhood as, a limited number of housing units, there's not gonna be like a ton of bus trips within that
Well,
time
there's gonna be
period.
none, because it's a,
The
because
bus won't
Westport
go
Lake.
down there.
Okay,
bus-
so-
Right, but I guess my question, which I think is sort of your question, is that there's gonna be 38 units there.
Right.
Probably
And-
38 kids, which
Well, it could be
means
more.
38 people with cars going.
And you've only estimated 30 to 40 trips at peak hours. And would that change, given the fact that there could be more? Because every house, let's say if every house has 2 cars. Let's say one car takes kid to work, kid to school, comes back, maybe finishes up, and then goes to work, and maybe another car goes to work. So I just think that 30 and 40 cars at peak hours may be low, given the fact that there isn't gonna be bus service up there, and that means that if we assume every house has one child, or even multiple, they're all gonna go to school at the same time, that's 38 trips right there and then, not including going to work trips.
Right.
So,
And that 40 trip is based on build-out or just what's there now?
It's based on build-out, yeah. That'd be the total number of units. And so what can I say for that is the standards have us use ITE's models in order to generate traffic, especially with residential units. There's a lot of studies that are done with those, so there's a lot of data points to pick from. As for the, dropping off a kid, coming back, and then leaving for work, I mean, it's a possibility that they could get that all done within the same, hour, and you're adding more trips. But in terms of the standards that we use for traffic reporting,
they don't include that.
it could include that, but no one is asking them where they're going in these peak hours. It's purely volumes, based on the development. It's purely anonymous, so it's just kind of the raw data that comes from it.
Not gonna change the level of service.
Right.
And what about, I guess, could we do some sort of specific study regarding, schools and busing? Oh, because as, Chairman said, that their kids are gonna be dropped off at the corner of 177 and Westport Lakes Road. That means, knowing everybody, there could potentially be 38 cars lined up at the end of, which would go away from the beginning of 177 all the way to the back of the development. Is there any sort of study that can be done to sort of figure that out?
If I may, it's like any other subdivision. Same like Briggs Landing, we did Brandon
Yeah,
90.
but Briggs Landing is not off of
Sure it is, it's off of Tickle Road.
but that's not a private way, and buses go up there.
Right.
Here, you're going off a private way, and buses will not go, the buses will not go on Westport Lakes Road because it's a private way. Bridge Landing is off of 177, going in Tickle Road.
Off of Tickle Road,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And, I've seen, there's an entrance off of, it's Tickle, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's 2 entrances.
Right, but
There's 2 entrances.
that's a Westport Road, a town road.
But
Westport
It
Lake,
wasn't always a town, when we first developed that, it wasn't always an accepted road. We went through a long period before it became, and I'm not sure all the roads are accepted, several of them have been accepted. So,
no, I'm saying Tickle was, that's why they could go into the development, because
well, why can't they go into the development here?
because.
Private road.
It wasn't private at the time.
It's private.
No, we're referring to Briggs Landing.
No, I'm referring to Westport Lake Road is a private lane. That's why
And,
buses
and,
cannot.
and Tickle,
will not.
and Briggs Landing was as well, for many years.
But Tickle Road wasn't.
Okay, that's correct. I don't, I leave that up to the, I leave that up to the professionals.
My
I don't-
question was directed to my
Sure,
consultant.
I understand.
Review. Thank you for
Go ahead.
answering the
Yeah,
question.
Well,
for him.
I brought about a different thing, but he can answer as well as he did, I think.
In terms of a specific study you could do for, say, specifically school trips, there isn't necessarily a guideline or a concrete way of doing that. What you could do is you could simply just double the amount of trips, but even in this scenario, it doesn't really seem like it would have
But is
too
there
much
any
of an
way of
impact.
looking at other similar situations across the state to say, okay, well, there's another, area that is similar to this? I know even in the town, we have a lot of other private roads that are similar to this. And I assume they have the same problem.
Right.
And I don't know whether there's any traffic issues
They're not
related to
very
that.
Houses, like, I'm on a private road, right? And all there's 5 houses on that private road, and everybody, well, there's no kids on our road anymore, but they all bring them to the top of the road.
Right?
That's only 5, right? Not 38.
Yep, so.
So what I would say to that is you could certainly look at some similar developments and take some traffic counts just to see what those
I
volumes
I
would
suppose we
be
could look and say,
compared to.
okay, yes, I mean, we do have some other areas in Westport that are similar to that, and maybe we could just get those reports for those areas to see if there's any issues with private roads and, especially around the school time.
Right. I mean, just generally speaking, like I've said before, the development, at least in terms of IT, is low volume. I understand the concern with the potential of extra trips, given, school trips and whatnot. What would I say to that is, yeah, you could, if you had similar developments that are similar in size and have, similar kind of access point, you could get empirical data from those sites just to see and compare how they go with ITE. That would be dependent on similar sites in terms of, a number of buildings, or you could, that would be the best way I would suggest about going about that if it's a true concern.
Any other questions?
But we definitely know the concern of the residents on Westport Lakes Road. I mean, we know it's the concern of the residents on Westport Lakes Road, because they've told, they've said as much, so.
Question from the board before I open it to the public? Anybody from the public want to talk about traffic? Traffic only.
Traffic only, so, I think it was you that quickly
Name-
mentioned.
Name and address.
Oh, Tony, 6 West
Tony.
Wall Lakes Drive, sorry.
Tony who?
RIAS, RIAS. There was a mention about 7 to 8 accidents per year coming off of 88 onto 177. I think that's how, I wrote it down, 7 to 8 accidents. I don't know, how it was mentioned. My question is, on coming off 88 to 177, Mouse Mill Road being the Wick Street there's about a dozen houses there. We are now looking at the next street over being West Wall Lakes Drive, with only 5 houses there with, I don't know, probably 15 cars there already, with 3 accidents in 2 years. With 38 houses being added to that, with another 15 houses added to that on top of it all, where would that study be? And then also, the vegetation part of it. We're talking about the Gulfview Lane only. We're not talking about the vegetation that was abruptly cleaned out over the last 3 weeks on the 177 side. So who's maintaining all that?
That's the owners of that property. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Okay.
tonight.
I know,
We will deal with that.
okay.
So
So my
We're asking
question
for
is,
something else.
there's a lot of traffic already going in that way, with very few cars going to the West Wall Lakes area. We're adding 38 houses with 2 to 3, 4 cars per house. There's gonna be a lot more traffic. There was a mention of 7 to 8 accidents per year. I don't know how, I wrote that down. I don't know if I misheard that.
You were talking about accidents coming off of
88.
88.
88, right?
Was that per
Was it
year?
per year or,
You have to ask the chairman, and then if he wants to answer.
okay. Was it 7 or 8 per year or?
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I had mentioned, the Westport Police Department provided crash data for 5 years.
5 years, right.
5.
So there were 14 crashes at the ramps over a 5-year.
Over a 5-year
No.
period.
Right, so not all in 1 year.
Right.
So it was spread out over the 5-year period, and it was fairly dispersed over those 5 years.
Okay.
Okay. So, my concern is, 5-year period, 8 accidents. We're looking at almost 2 per year. What is that gonna do to it when we add 38 houses plus finishing off the development? That would be my concern.
Okay, thank you. Next?
Manuel DePont, 53 Grand Pine Way, Westport. Now, the engineers that talked about the line of sight, the triangle, when you come out of Westport Lakes and you look to the right, it's a hill. It's probably about 120, 130 feet. Now, anyone going east on 177, to stop for that kind of traffic coming out of Westport Lakes is going to be quite different than what it is now. Now, Forest Hills, is it Forest Hills on 177? Forest Park. They had to add an extra lane in the middle so anyone coming down the hill would go into that site and take a left. And the right, has that been considered or that has not been considered at all? Add a center lane so that you can take a left.
I believe that's not considered because that would be part of the traffic study, that whether that was required or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, but we're talking about 14 accidents, but that was not considered from that location. 88 was considered. In front of Harry's, on Grand Pine Way, there's accidents there almost every month. That wasn't talked about right here. But I know at this point, this is a brand new development. How do you consider the amount of vehicles that are going to be going in and out of that location, and with the effect that it's going to have looking to the right, where you're going to look at 120 feet? The person coming on 177 cannot see Westport Lakes. They could only see it right towards the end. Now, if there's a car there taking a left, if there's a car there waiting to take a left, all they're going to do is get rear-ended.
Yeah.
Has that been
I've been
considered?
down that road several times, and you have a reasonable visibility. I live on Robert Street. We have 200 houses that all butt up to 177, and we don't have the line of sight that you guys have, and we don't have a ton of accidents.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just saying, just generally speaking, I'm talking about the research that was done. So we do research, but we don't talk about the potential of what can happen when this development is in place.
That's what he's
That was
doing.
studied. right?
That's what the study is.
This,
Right,
this,
so they only mentioned the Horseneck, the 88 coming off because that was a high, there was more accidents than there should have been based on the traffic. So the study with, and he's, here's the link, the study that was done at the corner of 177 and Westport Lakes Road, you didn't see a high amount of accidents based upon the amount of traffic.
Right.
And therefore, you concluded that having more traffic go through would not raise the incidence of traffic disproportionately.
that's, I understand that. I'm just saying is if the potential of having that many vehicles coming out of Westport Lake, going right or left, or going into Westport Lakes, right or left, actually,
Considered that, and they did not suggest in our, you did not propose
okay,
the turn lane and and I would.
Turn lane,
ask
thank you.
Our consultant that you would not, based upon the traffic on 177 onto Westport Lakes Road, you would not suggest a right, left-hand turn, the extra little turn lane thing.
so if you go down the road on 177 and you hit Forest Hills or Forest Park, they have maybe, 30 or 40 houses in there?
Oh, no, there's a lot of houses in there.
There's more than
More or
that.
less.
There's a-
Okay,
and
so that center lane is not feasible to even talk about here today?
It's feasible to talk about, but
not
their
feasible.
traffic studies said it's not necessary.
Right.
So
Oh, I
they-
would
Forest
beg- I would
Park,
beg
I
different.
assume, got it because the traffic study said that they needed it. Or,
I would beg to differ, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening, Brent Pereira, 26 Westport Lakes Drive. Just have a couple of things if I might go over. As far as traffic and access is concerned, I think it would be important to note that Westport Lakes Drive required a Mass State DOT access permit back when it was first constructed, and that permit has since expired, and the access permit in and of itself was never completed, it was never signed off, and it was never followed through, and there was no certificates of completion or compliance. So as far as site access and traffic, at this moment in time, the board should take under consideration that the state highway permit is expired and it was never followed through on. I did provide a copy of that whole entire,
We've got it,
that whole entire permit
yeah.
at the last meeting. Just some other things that were talked about by the applicant's representative. There was a lot of talk about, there's talk about sidewalks and HOAs and who's gonna be responsible for what, and he spoke about it today, so I feel like I should be able to talk and against it, where HOA is responsible for, we've been over this before, where there's supposed to be an HOA for Westport Lakes Drive, which doesn't exist. It exists on paper, but it's not our responsibility at the moment. It's a developer's responsibility. Where we're talking about 38 houses being built in a new subdivision, off of a subdivision that already is essentially defunct. It seems to be a clear and distinct problem. And to put that into the plans, into the methods, the requirements for this build-out, or the proposal, as far as the board is concerned, to make sure that those things are held accountable for the 40B proposal, I would suggest that just that alone would not be enough, because the current developers for the 40B, we all have great discussion as far as who is responsible for Westport Lakes Drive currently. And we all know what happened with Westport Lakes Drive over the last almost 20 years, where they also had restrictions and things that they were supposed to do to finish Westport Lakes Drive, which never occurred. Until now, because now all of this is being brought up and hashed up, now all of a sudden, they're trying to fix everything. You put restrictions on the 40B and assume that they're gonna act in good faith. I'm not sure that that's the case, considering what has already taken place over the last almost 20 years with the same people, essentially. And we can go back and forth about that for probably 3 or 4 weeks on who's responsible for Westport Lakes Drive, who was responsible, and who now is the current applicant for the 40B. The 40B has sidewalks proposed up in that development behind, off of Golfview Lane. Westport Lakes Drive does not have sidewalks. There's some significant considerations where, in the traffic study, it talks about sidewalks and where they end and where they connect or don't connect into Westport Lakes Drive. I think it's very important to consider that Westport Lakes Drive subdivision, as of now, has no sidewalks. There's all this important talk about sidewalks and this and that, about pedestrian traffic on the new subdivision, but to get to the new subdivision, it's defunct and doesn't have those abilities. There's no sidewalks. As far as I know, there's no plan for sidewalks to be put in. I think that's a significant problem where you have this nice, allegedly safe neighborhood of 38 houses that all have to pass through Westport Lakes Drive that isn't to standard, to the same standard as the 40B would be held to.
Okay?
I would argue that there's a significant safety standard or safety issue where all of those people have to access Westport Lakes Drive, which is not safe up to standards, to get to that development.
Okay? But the contractor has no authority to do anything with Westport Lake Drive,
And nor do we have any.
nor do we have any,
To do, we can.
I'm not
deal-
ask-
we can-
sure.
No, we can deal with Westport Lake Drive, but the fact that Westport Lake Drive was built without sidewalks, that was the standard when Westport Lake
Right.
Drive was
I understand.
done. No, there's nothing we can do retroactively regarding the sidewalks. There is plenty we can do, and I think that we have been working with other departments in town to address your concerns regarding the conditions of Westport Lake Drive.
I understand. I think what it comes down to is that you're looking for all these safety standards in that subdivision, but like I said, they don't follow through, so it's unsafe to get to the safe location.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, I agree.
Okay. Just one point of, as far as the traffic, the review that was done, on page 6 of 7, subsection 25, VAI noted the majority of the crashes at the intersection of Route 177 and Old County Road. They make a pretty good analysis of the location, not at Westport Lakes Drive, but where Old County Road comes into Route 177. There's a number of suggestions of what could be done to make the approach more safe. I guess my question is, some of them include doing things on state highway property that I would argue that they would have to get significant permission to do these things,
From the state, yes.
like as these are suggested. Trim, remove existing vegetation. Install a stop sign on Old County Road. Add reflective red tape. Replace a stop line. Install a stop ahead warning signs. Consider relocating a passing zone. The whole area is a passing zone. Part of the traffic study says that there should be a consideration of changing that area as from a passing zone to a no passing zone. There's some pretty significant suggestions in here to where this would require some significant permission to complete or accomplish to make the approach to Westport Lakes Drive safer.
I'm trying to, Old County,
So Old County Road, right across from the mobile, where it turns into Main Road.
Yeah.
Old County comes from 177.
well, that's not really Old County, that's Maine, that it turns into Old County.
But it is Old County.
Yeah,
But what I'm saying is,
It is okay.
there's some
that's,
significant,
okay,
there's some significant suggestions
Yes.
in the study that talk about approach to Westport Lakes Drive and some significant things that could be done that seems like those permissions would not, or potentially, I mean, you could petition Mass DOT to make some of those changes, but I would argue that those changes, or petition to make those changes, need to be done in advance of approval. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
I guess I'd like to ask Count, I mean, there is recommendations in that traffic report to make the existing surrounding infrastructure safer. Is that something we should be considering?
Yeah, I would ask,
And how do we consider that?
I'd recommend hearing from Mr. Dirk on that, because I know he's dealt with Mass DOT issues.
And
In other words, how would he typically deal with those types of recommendations with Mass DOT? I would ask their consultant first.
Okay.
Doug, you want to?
Mr. Dirk does work as peer reviewers for boards and
Okay.
other municipalities as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, we recommended in the transportation assessment that independent of this project, so even if this project were not to go forward, we recommended specific measures that could be undertaken at that intersection. They may sound major to some people. What I would suggest is signs, pavement markings, and vegetation clearing. I can apply for a permit tomorrow, and I would get that permit in 30 days to be able to go out and do that work. It's not major work. It's trimming up some vegetation, and it's in the southeast corner of the intersection. So if I'm coming up Old County to 177, and I'm sitting at the stop sign, that issue of the sight lines looking toward the highway, you trim the vegetation on the inside of the guardrail. The stop sign, there's already a stop sign there. What ends up happening is, over time, the reflectiveness of the stop sign fades. So it doesn't, as your headlights shine off of it, it doesn't shine back to you to give you the visibility of the sign. So what we had suggested is consideration should be given to replacing the sign so it gets back its reflectivity. What we usually do when we have locations with high crashes is the other thing we do is we add reflective tape that you can get at Home Depot that goes on the signpost. that does two things. It not only with the replacement of the sign picks up the headlights, makes it reflective, the tape's reflective as well.
Right,
So-
but we have a lot of stop signs in Westport that are LED
Correct.
with,
You could do similar things like that. So in
That's
this.
a lot of them.
Yeah, well, in this case, you do that if the sign somehow people are disobeying the stop sign, but that's,
everywhere.
yeah. That's not necessarily what's happening at this intersection, but there is a need for, as you said, putting the sign in the proper location, making sure that it's highly reflective. So we recommended that. Signs and pavement markings, it's reapplying those markings so that they're better visible. We did recommend, you typically do not have passing zones through intersections, especially with a gas station there.
Right.
Because if you're a driver trying to come out, what you don't want to have, you're not expecting people to be passing each other in the intersection, so you're not expecting that to happen. So what we had suggested is that consideration should be given to not having the passing zone go through the intersection, but that if you're going to have it, it happens to the west of the intersection, not there. So that's all we recommended. But to the extent that we
But is
needed
that something that you just recommend to the state, because the state would have to do that?
well, you could apply for a permit to do the work, or the state can do it. So the same thing, it depends upon how the board goes goes through the approval process on the project. It requires a state approval, so even if there was consideration to saying, we think you should do this, it has to be subject to Mass DOT approval, because you saying that they have to do it, it's not within their control. It's
Yeah.
the state's control. So permission can be asked of the state to do that. The state can say yes or no. So it can go either way. The developer can make application to do it. The developer can say to the state, hey, we've taken a look at this intersection, and we think this should be done independent of the project, and then let the state, these are maintenance things, they can consider it as well. So even with us providing the traffic study to them, they would look at that and say, okay, well, thank you, we didn't study that area, we appreciate the recommendations. It could go as far as that, as you saying the applicant shall make the state, or shall submit the results of the traffic study to the state for their consideration to implement those. But again, I think as council has said, it requires a DOT approval. So anything that you were to suggest that might need to happen along 177 has to be subject to the state issuing a permit, because the developer is not entitled to that permit, they have to request it.
So,
Right.
we ask for, so if a permit is asked for, and let's say a permit is granted,
Correct.
then who does the work?
If the permit, if the applicant is requesting the permit, they're the applicant, then the state would issue the permit to the applicant to go out and undertake the work, is what would happen. That permit it just gives the applicant the right to enter upon state property to make the improvements, is basically what it is.
So we could, I'm gonna talk to my attorney at the same time, is we could request in our conditions that the traffic plan is submitted to the state requesting permits to do X, Y, and Z. If granted, applicant will take care of that.
Yeah, right. That would be the subject to clause of it.
That is a tricky intersection, especially with the gas station right there.
That's,
It
Because the
is.
people are coming in and out of that gas station very
Correct.
quickly and interfering with the traffic especially that's egressing off.
there was a study done for that too, because that's a relatively new gas station.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Weren't those issues raised when the permitting of the gas station?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's my understanding, is that was raised.
Okay.
And it was a responsibility of the developers of the gas station to do that.
Ah, okay.
That's my understanding
I
of the
just wanted
history.
to note, I can craft those conditions in the event of an approval with conditions. I would have DPW, wherever your highway people are, weigh in to you during this process if they agree. Typically, I'll see sort of a collaboration, DPW and highway engineer, whoever, highway superintendent, and they weigh in on the process. So I'm sure they have not seen the recommendations for the off-site improvements, so I would request that they comment on that as well. And
Right,
then-
yes, we go back to the highway department with because we are going to be adding that much more traffic just down road from it.
Yeah, you'd want to have them weigh in on, have a look at this, because if they initially commented, they didn't have access to any of this information.
Right.
I don't think they have commented, yes.
Even if, yeah.
Yes, okay.
But I
don't know,
would,
do you have a town engineer or,
We have a,
sometimes?
we have a, yeah, the highway department
Yeah.
supervisor, I think there's an engineer, yeah.
Oh, great, yeah.
Ish. Okay,
Any other comment from, go ahead.
Just a short rebuttal. As far as that conversation that was just occurring, I would argue that our highway department would have nothing to do with or make any comments on this, considering the private way aspect of Westport Lakes Drive and the fact that Route 177 is a state highway. So that would be problematic to,
I think
No,
our
I-
attorney is saying it's
yeah.
not problematic.
No, I don't agree with that. I typically would have, in other words, that the town, yes, it's
Because
state.
Oak County is a town
Oh,
road, and
right.
177 is a
town-
state road.
Your town people that are
Yeah, are using
responsible
it.
for those types of issues will typically collaborate on those types of issues. That wouldn't be a problem. I'm not saying that they have the authority to do it.
No,
But-
or have the responsibility to do
But
it
they're,
with a permit.
they would
but
certainly
they-
have, might have relevant comment to you about the viability of that.
Okay.
okay, I understand that. The initial traffic study was done by the applicant or somebody the applicant paid to do the traffic
Yes.
study, correct? So those suggestions that were from the applicant's person, the company that did the traffic study are there. And the gentleman that just spoke made it seem like something like what I brought up or what's in that would be so easy to accomplish, to file the permit and get it within 30 days, which I'm not sure that's the case, but if it's that easy to accomplish, as he suggests just a moments ago, then I would say that that would need to be put in as part of the requirements. It was their traffic study, done by their company. Those are the suggestions that, done by them. The gentleman just said that it would be very easily accomplished to
Other than
to
the fact that
propose
they don't-
those things.
Other than the fact
Now,
that they
whether,
don't have control over it.
I understand, whether Mass DOT allows that or not,
Right.
that's besides the point.
Yes.
But the point is that it's reflected in the study by their consultant. He makes it seem like it's very easy to get done. I would say, then do it.
Well, I think, you know,
Put it in.
I think we've already discussed sort of
How you do
impromptu
it.
that we probably will.
I understand it was
Yeah,
discussed,
and I-
but the gentleman just got up here and said it was
Yeah.
so easy to get acconclished.
But
Then
I'm also
just
saying
just
that
do it then.
You're asking us to put something as in a condition,
And
right? And I think what I would request from you is if you think of things that should be conditions, keep them running tally, and then when we issue when the draft, then you can compare it to what we're already thinking that this might be a condition.
Okay.
So instead of, so I would say, make a list of what you think the conditions should be based on the presentations that you're gonna be hearing over the next few months. And we can compare them to our conditions
Right.
to make sure that it's adequate.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Hopefully, we will be able to participate in negotiations and discussions of the permit, of the conditions of the permit.
Yes.
In an open meeting. So one of our concerns is that this is a pre-existing condition. If it's simple as clearing some vegetation, and it's not a big deal, okay? But if they all of a sudden want to change the roadway or different kinds of things like that, then it's a pre-existing condition, we have to talk about that. But simple things, if, Mr. Dirk said, it's easy to get permission to clean that up, that's not a big deal from our point of view. But we'll participate in how those conditions should be, from our point of view.
Then could you take care of the Cumberland gas station and Main Road here too?
Well, the issue that I have is, the issue that I have is with that gas station, et cetera, is that there was no follow-up, okay, regarding the conditions of that permit. I understand there was a lot of legalese and so forth regarding that permit, and so it's a and it applies more to them
yeah.
than it does
Yes.
our Westport Lakes Road and our development.
I was
But
talking
we're
about
willing
Main Road right here.
I'm sorry?
No, we're just
It is
talking
the
about.
most,
Yeah.
that's
You're-
the
I mean,
worst.
You have more input, you have more information than that, like, we haven't gone, we were not part of that permitting process, so we have no idea
Right.
what happened. So I would request, when we do, if we do bring it up in our conditions, and if you think that perhaps it's not your responsibility, but yet there was something in that existing permit of the gas station that should be addressed, we would appreciate it if you could bring that to us.
That would be through the planning board, but there again,
we're-
if-
but we're
if
not
it's,
the
if
planning
it's as simple as, you know,
Right.
cleaning up a little, that's not a big deal, but, so that's what we're gonna talk
But if
about.
you contest any condition based upon you think it's a pre-existing condition, we would like you to provide us with the paperwork to prove that.
I will
Not
see what I
us.
can get from the planning board.
But from what I gathered through the last few conversations with your consultant, we don't have a DOT permit that's valid at the end of 177 and Westport Lakes Road now. And if you were to do all that work, you'd need to get that permit. So we should make that as part of it too.
No, that's
Well, you
that's
can't do any-
unacceptable,
from
that's
what I gather, you
unacceptable,
can't
that's
do
an
any work.
unacceptable
You can't
condition.
go over there and clear brush without a DOT permit.
We haven't gotten to the conditions, so. I would
We'd have to
not
look
speak
at how that would have to be crafted, obviously. There are some things in there that would be acceptable to us, and there are some things that might not be. So
I
we
think
have to
those-
get to that
type of
point.
condition, we're gonna have to work with council on how
Yes.
to craft that.
Yes. Okay, any other comments?
Stacy Pereira, 26 Westport Lakes Drive. I did my own little traffic study, well, not really traffic study, but I just did my own little research. So I do have Westport Police Department reports of accidents. I am curious on what the 5-year period was that the traffic study was done. Are you able, Chairman, if I can ask?
What are the 5 years?
He's
He's
looking.
looking.
He's looking.
Yeah.
He's looking.
Yeah, it was 2017 to 2021.
2017 to 2021.
And I'll just note that 2021 is the newest year of complete data that Mass DOT has.
Ah, okay.
So that's why it's that
That's
way.
why you didn't do 22 and 23, because it wasn't available.
Right, it's not official data until the system has confirmed all the crashes from that year, basically.
Right.
So,
Right, and that's COVID years too, so it complicates things.
right.
So I went to Westport Police Department, and there's 33 pages of just from when Westport Lakes Drive was established. There's 33 pages of incidents. There's like a certain, some like mileage range that they, that they printed this up for me. Just with 4 houses there prior to our 5th house that just came along this summer, there was 3 accidents on the road involving 3 of us. So 3 out of the 4 houses between 2022 and 2024, there was 3 accidents.
Can you describe like what kind of benders, back enders?
So one
T-bones.
was an incident where someone was pulled into the driveway and backed out and then they got sideswiped.
Okay.
There is some speeding that also happens with some of our neighbors that we've, had some professional discussions with. Unfortunately, because it's a private road, it's not like we can go to Westport Police and ask for one of those monitors or
Right.
to be placed on the road. So between like 2 of our families, unfortunately, we've had to approach each other and say, hey, watch out for your speed. There's some young children on the road. So the 3 incidents, so one was pulling into the driveway, backing up like you're gonna reverse. Another incident was one of the families were pulling in, another family was pulling out. So they crashed at the beginning of Westport Lakes Drive on 177. And then one was, as it was described today, taking the left over that hill, they got rear-ended. So taking the left onto 177, I'm sorry, Westport Lakes from 177, they got rear-ended. So that happened in 2024. So I'm confused on the traffic study on how it just concentrate. I mean, I understand that the amount of accidents or whatever had occurred on Route 88 coming on to 177. But I would think maybe more of a comparison would be Mouse Mill Road. I don't know how many houses are on Mouse Mill Road, but if I had to guess, I would say maybe 30 just on that road, because that's a dead end also.
It's a dead end.
So I would just be curious on if that's more of a comparison versus the gas station and, Route 88 and 177. I also pulled the school bus routes, and there is no other bus stop that picks up 30 children. The most is 10 to 15 children, and that's Novichok.
Yeah.
And I've actually dropped off missed the bus stop, ran to Novichok, and had my child go on the bus. They're not cars piled up on Novichok. They're walking their child to their bus stop area. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Also, when we brought up Robert Street has a blinking light. So I feel like that's not really a comparison also. And the same thing with Tickle Road. Robert Street and Tickle Road across from each other.
Yep.
So I don't really think that that's much of a comparison to Briggs Landing with those kids, because that's not a private road. It's a road of Westport, and then it intersects with 177, which is a state highway. And there's a blinking light there. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna be around about
Anyone else?
But
Okay.
I think all the other intersections, correct me if I'm wrong, have been studied, but that you didn't conclude that there was an exorbitant amount of accidents there. So every Mouse Mill and 177 was looked at for accidents. And Oak County and 177 and all the other, and Westport Lakes Road and 177 was looked, but there was not, based upon the traffic flow or numbers, it didn't seem exorbitant. Okay.
No other comments?
Can I ask a question?
Who do you, okay. You-
So I know this is a long process and you have to restrict comments about specific things during these meetings. I just ask when you would open the floor to, the elephant in the room that I've been bringing up since the start of this process.
You've been talking about who's running the show.
Well,
Well,
again, I don't want to get to it now.
Well,
I just want to know
And I'm gonna
if and when
cut
I'm
it
going
off
to be able
anyway,
to get.
because I allowed everybody to voice their opinions in the first couple of meetings. Well, not the first meeting, because it was introductory. We don't have any authority over the certification of the contract. That's Mass Housing. If you look into 40B regulations, the zoning board aspect of this, of the 40B, has no authority over the certification of the contractor. If we were to say anything about it, it would be thrown out in court. That pretty accurate?
Pretty much, yeah.
We wanted to hear your gripes and everything, because I think it's important for us to understand it. But we can't utilize that as part of our deliberations.
My argument is some of the things that I have to speak about brings into the aspect of site access. And
Anything
as
that
far
has
as
to do with-
my understanding is from all the other meetings, site access is everything for this project. And some of the things that I have prepared that I need proper time to speak about, I'm not asking for that tonight,
No.
but I do need some time to talk about those things. And
As
I
long
think it's
as it has
important for
nothing
the
to do
board.
with-
Site access from Attorney
I think
Pucci.
We can't talk about Westlake Drive, that's not our job.
But I think you have to because
No,
it's
we
the
can't.
access to the 40B.
We can talk about the safety aspects of the traffic, but they are not responsible for what happens on Westlake Drive. We can't make them responsible for it. That's not in, they don't, they have no control over that. They only can do what they have control over.
Okay? I'm okay with that, except the argument is control and who has had control,
Well-
right? I'm going to digress with that. But site access, and I'll argue this again, site access is everything. And if
Well,
you
I
don't
mean,
have,
okay.
if Westport Lakes Drive in and of itself is not a viable access way to the 40B, then the 40B can't take place.
Well,
And there are very
according-
important
According to
things
the
to
highway
go over.
department, it is a viable road.
Okay.
And according to the state that came out,
Yes,
gave them the permit. Yeah.
yes.
Do we
I'll
agree?
dig-
We're not,
I'll
we can't
digress
answer
for
that,
tonight,
but I think,
I will need time to talk about that thing, that stuff, because it directly reflects site access.
Yep, I think
In
we
the-
have.
In the case of the planning board currently, with what's going on between Westport Lakes Drive and the current developer and the past developers, there are many questions to be answered on whether the current subdivision is intact, or
Yes.
if it's potentially revoked. And if that's the case, if the subdivision becomes revoked, then the access is gone.
We're
That
aware-
stuff
we're
has
aware-
to be settled
We are
out.
aware of those issues, thanks to you. We are
Yes.
considering those. I don't know if there's any more information that we really,
I can tell you that I have more information.
I think we have enough to.
I will take it up with the planning board, and then I'll bring it to the ZBA, because it's important. Thank you.
Okay, what we need to do now is plan what we are going to do at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Unless you have something else.
If we have time tonight, I thought on the agenda was some of the engineering. We talked at the last meeting that we would try to finish. So I have the engineer here tonight, and I know that, we gave you a quick overview a couple of meetings ago of the plans. We have presented some plans. Your consultant has reviewed our plans. So,
We're not ready to do that yet.
your consultant did, okay, so
So
what's your pleasure? I mean,
What,
yeah.
what can we accomplish at the next meeting? You want to do stormwater management? You want to do, we want to do this in blocks.
Sure,
I want to get blocks done at a time.
And that's what
Traffic
we
is
talked about.
pretty much done, there's some cleanup, but
On
we
traffic.
understand it now.
Yes.
The next block is what? Is it storm management?
Well,
Is
it's
it the
all-
overall
the
engineering? Is
storm-
it, go ahead.
Sure. The storm management is all part of the engineering.
Yes.
So I think and we have submitted a report reviewed by your engineer now, between now and the next meeting. Brian, your consultant will review our response to his
Right,
review.
right, just like
Similar
we
to
did
what
this.
we've done with the
Just like we did
traffic.
this.
Okay, and hopefully at the next meeting, the two engineers would have had time to discuss it between themselves and maybe sort of have a combined report or one report and the other regarding the engineering, which would include, we'll make the changes, I guess, to the plans that we talked about, the triangle and that sort of thing. And the stormwater management is, it's a complicated.
It's a big thing, right, yes.
So,
The traffic was bigger.
well, this is a lot of, but the numbers, I mean, when you start looking at this,
Yes.
it's way above
Got the stormwater?
pay grade.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that at the next meeting, tonight, I basically see the traffic sort of resolved, a couple of cleanup
Yes.
issues, all right? And I hope to do the next meeting, the same thing with the engineering.
Well, the
on both of
engineering
them.
is to cover what?
The engineering is going to be discussing how the road is developed. The storm management
It'll be a part
report
of it.
is how it all works together.
Okay,
That there's a plan already been submitted to the Conservation Commission, so the wetlands are no longer an issue. So I think on the engineering, we're gonna be discussing
Ryan,
the
what,
location of the roads.
are we going to be ready for this for the next meeting?
Depends on how far you want to push this out.
It's usually about a month. Don't we have one scheduled, or is it
I think we have one scheduled for next week.
26th
Of March.
of
We
March?
also have one
March.
next week,
That's possible.
on my calendar,
You
Okay.
think we can,
February 26th, don't we have any?
yeah.
26 of
But
them?
not next week.
Oh, no,
What?
no,
No.
no, and it will be the only thing on the docket, because when we have these,
All right.
we don't schedule anything
So-
else. It's just not,
So we can't do it from March 26th, we have a meeting scheduled and something on the docket that might be a little.
March 19th.
I prefer to do the first week in April.
I mean, we're almost up against a deadline.
Well, there again, we talked before about extensions. We're gonna
The deadline
we're
is
gonna
June.
cooperate with
deadline is June.
Okay,
June 5th, I think, is where
okay,
we're
so
at.
it's moved to June 5th, but still, in the beginning of April, that's only 2 months.
Well,
What-
well, I'm saying the 19th won't give us enough time.
Okay, yeah.
I don't
I'd
think.
I'd rather not
I'm
come
probably
in
not going to be here.
with nothing, right, I agree.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that,
We have a ZBA scheduled for the 26th, or we were going to.
of March.
Yes, that's
And
for this.
we have one on February 26th,
And I mean,
and one on March 26th.
March 26th is a different
Yes.
matter.
Oh.
It's going to be a long meeting, so.
Yeah,
That's not this.
no.
Okay, okay. So we would have to schedule it
It-
some other night.
That's why I suggested the 19th, but if Mr. Cussin wants to go farther than
Well, 19th is not going to give us enough time
Yeah,
to
you're
go
not
back.
gonna, what about the next week, April
Second.
2nd?
The first,
I don't,
second, third, fourth, so
No, if you'd be here?
I don't think so, yeah. That's okay,
Yeah, I mean, Jerry's not here tonight, so.
yeah.
what day do you think? Oh,
April 2nd, do we have, you know,
Chris, you available? Okay.
are you available?
April 2nd?
April 2nd?
Yes. Let's just make sure, remind your members, you can mull it in, but we can only miss one hearing session. So you want to make sure you maintain your 5 voting members.
Yes, but,
If you can't make that one,
I don't think I can, I'm not
Yeah.
absolutely sure,
but
but I think I'll be
hopefully
on.
you don't have to miss another one, though. Because you can mull it in for the one, but you won't be able to miss 2.
You
I
can only,
was always under the impression
you
that,
can only watch the video one time.
Yes.
So that's already happened tonight with one meeting member, right?
yes.
So he can't miss any more.
Can't miss any more, exactly. Same for everybody else. So if you're planning on missing one, make sure it's the
It's
only
the
one.
only one. Okay.
What,
Right. Or somebody who hasn't missed a meeting, like Janice, who's been here for all of them.
You
could
could,
then be-
yeah.
Could be
I
involved.
mean,
Could come in to pinch hit.
yeah, I don't love changing
Well,
voting
no,
members, but yeah, you could do that, but I would prefer you to, you know, you kind of said who your voting members were at the beginning. It would
Yes.
be good to stick with that group.
Well, my plan has always been that we have 5 regular members and 2 alternates. My plan has always been that I want the 5 regular members to be the final voting members for the decision, as long as we can manage that.
Gotcha.
If something happens and somebody's sick and can't come and whatever, we have 2 alternates, and as long as they have been involved in the process the whole way, that's why we have alternates. And I would utilize one of the alternates then as a final member.
I'm just reminding, just keep in mind.
Jerry needs to know that
Yes.
he's used his chit.
Yes, okay.
May I ask a question? Would you please finish what you were saying as what exactly you think that we'll be addressing the next?
The engineering.
Engineering, yeah, we weren't allowed to finish. What were you saying?
Well, it's going to be, we're going to be talking about anything you want to talk about, but strictly from engineering, they're going to take a look at the stormwater management plan. And based on the way the roads are laid out and the location of the detention basins and the location of drainage outlets and so forth, there's all of that work from an engineering point of view. So we're proposing as to how that's going to work. And this report, the engineering, the stormwater is.
Which we haven't gotten yet, right? Do we have?
Yes,
We
we've.
just got it yesterday.
Yeah, we
Oh.
just,
We don't have-
and
we
I
don't
have
have a-
additional copies tonight, and
Right.
I'm not sure how many copies, it's pretty thick. But, and we're sending that, or have sent that to your consulting engineer, and they can review. And they may want to share CAD drawings between themselves and so to make it easier for your peer review engineer. So they're going to take a look at all of that. And he's going to come back and says, yes, the engineering works.
So
Now-
stormwater management and how that impacts engineering, is there any other aspects of the engineering that we're going to be, that you think?
No, I mean, there's going to be, at some point in time, the septic system, that we have a common septic
That's
system.
later.
But that is permitted with the Board of Health.
Right.
So
Well, the
it's,
septic systems and where you put your wells and all that, that's all identified, that all has to be identified on your plans.
yes, there's a separation, well, we have the location of the wells. And typically, you need separation between a well and a septic. But in this particular case, we have a common septic system.
Yes.
Which is near the entrance of the roadway.
Yeah.
And that's got to be permitted by the Board of Health. And they may have someone take a look at that. I'm not sure Brian, MBL will take a look at that or not.
I mean, we've started to look at some of our comments, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So some of our comments are addressing the proposed septic system. And for the record, Brian Dunn with MDL Land Development and Permitting, I'm the principal of the firm, 5 Bristol Drive in southeastern Mass. So, we've made some recommendations on the septic system. I've noted on the letter, the design that's currently in front of you is for a 56-unit septic system. So that there's some plan changes that need to be made and addressed by the applicant's engineers. So there's a lot of things about the drainage that need to be addressed, like test pits, confirming soils. They were using in drainage analysis, the northeast soil data, but some of the test bits that they did, that weren't shown on the plans, but they provided the test bit data, shows loamy sand and sandy loam, but they didn't provide any infiltration as part of those basins.
But is this something you go back and forth with?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So you send him a plan, he looks at it, our consultant looks at it, calls you up and say, hey, I got, or emails you or whatever, I get issues in this area, and you
Yeah, we're gonna try.
hope to resolve it,
We're
or
gonna-
at
we're
least
gonna-
identify
We're gonna
it.
try to resolve, now, let me back up the whole bit. From a 40B point of view, plans that are being submitted to the zoning board of appeals are to be preliminary in nature, but yet provide enough information for the board to make intelligent decision about the development with certain conditions. We're going way above that, where these plans are much more than preliminary, and they're not finished plans. So what will happen is that as we go back and forth, all right, there still could be some conditions that Brian, that we have not met, that Brian would like us to meet, that can be conditioned in the permit, because as we go back and forth with these plans, that's not the last look. You're gonna make a decision, and in that decision, you're gonna say X, Y, and Z. So we have to conform, our plans have to comply with all of the terms and conditions of that permit. And then that final set of plans at post-permit, okay, is given to your engineer to be sure that we have complied with all of those things before we come back to the board, because the board has to sign off on those plans. So this is not your last, you know, as we go back and forth, this is not your last look at this. So the regulations are very clear in that regard, and we're gonna try and do as much as we possibly can to satisfy, you know, the plans to 95% completion.
Okay, Attorney Pucci?
Yeah, the process that I prefer you to follow, what I would recommend is that the peer review has provided a report. He noted a number of issues in there. I don't recommend an outside the hearing process where the peer reviewer is communicating with the developer or the consultant, but for a specific issue that may come up that you want them to communicate on, what I would recommend instead is that the applicant formally respond to the recommendations and the questions raised in the peer reviewer's report. And usually they'll do it they reproduce the report, they put the comments in, and then they put their reply. And so either they say the plans have been updated accordingly to see XYZ plans, or we object to that condition, or that information was provided previously. They respond formally to all the comments.
Okay.
And then you have
Then you have that
an
traceability.
opportunity to, they produce that to you, you see it in advance, and then you can have that discussion with the applicant and your peer reviewer at the next hearing. But that's the process that.
I think that's a
would
lot
recommend.
cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
but there again, we're trying to, time-wise,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Paul, I don't know how late you usually go, just in the evening, but since we have everybody here, it might be helpful to make just a preliminary cursory presentation, since my understanding is that the board really hasn't seen the most recent iteration of this 38-unit plan presented by the applicant's engineer. And then maybe if just very preliminarily, you identify anything that you might be interested in seeing answered, or a question you might have, that might advise the peer reviewer to look at specific things, so that we might, now that we have a month, or at least between now and the next hearing, if we do a preliminary presentation now, it might trigger things that we can resolve between now and then, rather than waiting for you to see it for the first time come April. So I don't know how late you go on Wednesday nights.
It's not a matter of time, it's a matter of, what kind of, I mean, a cursory overview I'm fine with. Anything more than that, no.
And that's all it would be.
Just a
That's
very
all it would
cursory
be.
overview.
And if,
Because I know things have
anybody
changed.
sees something that you have experience with in a prior development in town that you might want to point out, or proximity of one feature to another feature, and if there's nothing, fine, but we've at least given the board a glance at the plan presented by the engineer. The engineer can show, this is where the wells are, this is the entrance configuration, this is where we're putting the common leaching fields, these are the.
Yeah, I mean,
stormwater
we've
systems.
seen all this before. You're saying that there's been major changes. Is that what you're saying?
No, but I think,
No.
my understanding.
So we've
is-
seen all this before.
But have you received a presentation from the engineer as far as how the
Yes.
Yeah.
pieces are put together?
Yes.
Yep.
And based on that, do you have any initial comments?
No,
that
that's
you
what
would
we're
like-
waiting for the
Well, what do we
consultant
got
to
to
do.
lose to let them give us, what, 15, 20 minutes,
Oh,
whatever it'll take? I
But
mean-
before we get to that, we have what you're suggesting, with the engineers going back and forth with the letter, item by item, we have, which you have not yet seen, and we just did it 2 days ago, we have already initially responded.
Yeah, what I recommend is what I said. So you'll have,
Right.
you'll see the peer reviewers' questions and comments, and then the usually they'll put it in boldface after.
That's how the traffic was done.
Just like the traffic. one.
Exactly, yeah, and you see it in advance, and then that informs it makes you better prepared for your meeting to ask questions, and then if you had follow-up
Yes,
questions.
but the only thing I was getting at, though, is that similar to the traffic, they sent him a report. He then asked questions, documented them in the reports, and sent it back to the,
And we've responded.
and he responded. We saw all that traffic, so that was all documented. But we didn't wait to come to the meeting for him, for the traffic, our consultant, to say, I've got issues with your report.
All right, well, your peer reviewer issued a report with all the questions.
And it went to the.
And we've answered
And they
that.
answered them. And so.
On traffic,
On traffic.
No, on the engineering too.
yeah.
Right, but we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Right.
Right, okay. I'm good.
So if we've gone back and forth with the engineering, why do we need another 5 weeks or 4 weeks?
Well, because there's a lot more there's more that we have to respond to.
Okay.
And there's gonna be some additional questions and
Right.
some testing that he's looking for. and that
There was a
kind of-
lot in your report, and I really appreciate it. I mean, it was very informative.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
And we've,
obviously
and
paid.
and we've responded item by item. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but we've
No, I haven't
submitted
seen
that. She should have,
Haven't
right?
seen that, but
You should
I
have,
want to
you-
thank you for that.
Yeah, we have from Farland, right?
I'm sorry?
The
Yes, that's
response-
the
yeah.
report. So what happened is that Fallon Engineering has taken NBL's, and item by item, has responded. So you should have that just.
Oh, that was
We
just
just- yeah.
today. We-
Yes,
okay,
that's
Yeah.
correct, that's correct, that's correct.
Yeah, okay,
Did
yeah.
you send that to me,
Seen that.
Maria?
It was, I think yesterday it got sent around,
Oh, okay.
right?
You might have just gotten it.
Well, can we just let them do a quick
Sure.
review?
Let's make it quick. Because
You're not even gonna
we
be here
have
next
seen
meeting
this
tonight.
before.
He just wants to see it.
Yeah. It'll refresh us. We've been doing this
Especially
for a
the
long
changes-
time.
Especially the changes from the last time they looked at it. Did you want extra copies of this? More?
There's 5 of us.
You want a full report of the traffic?
We all
You're more than welcome. We'll make as many copies as you want.
We all want a full report of the.
If anybody on this board can understand this, hats off to them. But we'll give you as many copies, thank you. We'll give you as many copies as you want.
Hey, do we all want a copy? I mean, it has 3.
Yep, I'm digesting for you,
Sorry.
Yeah, you should have.
Well, we're just gonna see.
Yeah, I've just given you 3 right now.
Stormwater, right?
the way things are probably.
I'll give you 5, I'll give you 10. I mean,
That's the stormwater?
This is stormwater.
Do you want a copy?
Yeah, I'll take the stormwater.
I mean, that's why you have the technical.
give me a report on it. It's pretty complicated stuff.
Well, you made a comment that.
We'll give you,
I gotta justify my Sherpa
Well,
expense.
you made a
I'll
comment.
give you
that-
more copies.
Okay.
You did make a comment that he was in front of the last Conservation Commission, and it was extended till March 11. It wasn't approved that day? No, okay, because you said we've been through conservation.
No, the wetland line has been approved.
I just wanted to make sure that that was not what was heard, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Good evening, for the record, John Marchand from Farland Corp. Been working closely with Christian Farland from our office. I believe he had given a brief overview of the, kind of the layout of the site, the number of units. The project includes approximately 2,450 feet of new roadway, in addition to the construction of Gulfview Lane. The total site area, development area is 25 acres. 16 of that will be new land disturbance. As far as stormwater, what we analyzed were these two wetland areas on the site, a northern wetland and a southern wetland. We have off-site runoff and on-site runoff contributing to 5 basins throughout the site. These are detention basins. We're proposing to treat the water with storm scepter units for water quality. And we analyzed these 2 design points for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events, make sure we're not increasing runoff to those wetland areas. And our analysis shows that these 5 basins allow us to slow the runoff enough so that it meets pre-existing conditions. A lot of the changes that were made as a result of MBL letter, I would characterize as clerical notes, details. I don't know how into the details you want to get about
I don't want to get into details, just top-level summary, you know.
Yeah. Some of the changes we made, we added some lot labels, some bearings and distances to the lot labels, provided pipe capacity calcs, grate inlet capacity calcs. Yeah, some just additional detail and notes on the layout of the site, really.
Okay.
Most of the changes that were made, I don't think most of the board members would notice. It has, some of it was like meets and bounds on certain issues. Those kinds of details, which are important from an engineering point of view, but from an overview point of view, lay people, with all due respect, would not maybe notice all of those changes. The roadway is in the same the roadway is in the same location. We have not changed the road. The length of the road has not changed. There may be a change on the location of the septic system, the reserve. When you do a septic system, you need,
An alternate.
help me out a little, but as you do, you need the septic system, and then you need a reserve in
Yes.
case the septic system fails.
Yes, correct.
So right now, we're having a bit of an issue with the reserve,
where the-
the location of the reserve. So that may or may not change.
Yep.
And if it does change, that may or may not affect when we go to the Concom as to if we're encroaching more into the buffer area. Don't know that yet. So that's something that Brian has raised that we really need to take a look at. But all of the detention basins are all in the same location. Now, some of the pipes may be changed, the outfall, the infall, from an engineering point of view, based on the stormwater management plan, some of that has changed. But I'm not going to notice it.
Has a full survey been done here?
That was another issue that had been raised. We were utilizing
And
this.
concrete bounds put in? Was that a change?
We're proposing some bounds throughout the
Say that again, John?
we're proposing bounds at.
Yeah.
points
They're
of
having
entry
they're having a
on the
bit of a
road.
problem closing the survey?
I'm sorry, what are
From what
you
I
saying?
gathered in the
bounds?
information I've been reading,
About-
that was part of something that was going on.
Yeah, there's, when they do the survey, a little bit on what but when they do the survey, they have to, all the points have to kind of come
No,
together.
From what I gathered, it's required that you put in concrete, 4x5
Yeah.
concrete.
About, to answer your
Yeah.
question, a
The
bound.
general area.
A bound is usually 4-5 inches square. It's concrete pillar.
Yep.
That goes maybe 4 feet, 5 feet high, goes into the ground.
Oh, okay.
So that it doesn't get moved.
Right, oh, so
So-
you know where your property lines are.
Yes, well, not every single lot.
Right.
But,
road
As
layout.
they do the boundary around the perimeter of the property,
Yep.
those bounds will be there, so that
Yep.
later on, another engineer and so forth, it helps the engineers in subsequent.
And when they're citing when they're actually then doing the sites for the actual houses too, they'll use those bounds to cite them.
The new, that's right,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Well, when you said in the very beginning of tonight's meeting is, you're going to build this whole road from the get-go.
That's my understanding, they will.
gonna build-
Well, when you say the whole road,
Well, and not a,
the base road,
the base road.
The base
Not a finished product.
That's
The whole road.
To build this.
All of that,
left and right.
and left and right.
Assuming that there's some issues here, right?
I don't think the road will change.
No, I'm not gonna say, I'm just talking about your,
Yes.
that this may be defunct and you may have to get, might have to grant you a permit to build that road, right? And you'll build all this as well as the turnarounds.
Correct.
And then you'll just build the houses
There again,
as
it's the rough road.
rough road,
Yeah.
right, yes.
So we have to,
We're
when,
going to clear all that and make a draft road.
yes,
I mean, a
that's
base
correct, that's
Now, the
correct.
houses on the far left of that butt up against the houses there to the, right.
Yes,
You've looked at, I assume, well, maybe it's a bad assumption, every house is going to have a well.
yes,
And every well has to be at least 100 feet from anybody's septic.
correct.
There's a
Yes.
problem with one, right?
And you're
I
going to have
think, I
to,
think it's got to be 100 feet
from a septic.
from us, from, I don't know what part of the septic, but 100 feet from
Right.
probably the edge of the septic, yes.
The regulation is 100 feet from the absorption system to the well.
The absorption system, okay, right. So,
But the
That-
absorption system is
so
way
you have
down
to
the
then
bottom.
look at the houses that back up
But
to
there
it.
might be, we can, we'll.
Yeah,
yeah.
so
There could be an absorption system back here that would interfere with a well over here.
But they-
When, not public comment.
Yeah, we got as-built plans from the Board of Health for these lots. We have the septic location shown on the detailed
okay.
plans.
What
Anyway,
about the
just a-
wells locations? I mean, I guess.
That's all going to come out
I
in
know
the
that,
plan
I mean,
somewhere.
we talked about before that, you know, you might you might say, okay, this has to go here, but then you can't drill. I mean, I guess.
Well, although, yes, I mean, John is saying that the location, that the, are you showing all the wells on those lots, John? As it relates to the abutters, that's the question, I think.
I can answer that question. They're on the plans. However, there's 50-foot radius around the wells to the septic systems, and I'm not too sure why there's a 50-foot radius
Yeah,
when the 100-foot is the
when
requirement.
a 100-foot requirement,
We noted that in our letter.
okay.
Again, there seems to be conflicting information. Some days you say.
And that's what, we gotta respond to that report. and
Okay.
I personally don't know the answer.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
I'm asking about the wells.
Yes,
Some days, right today, you're saying that every house lot is gonna have a well.
correct.
In previous meetings, you said there may be shared wells, because you may not be able to drill a well on that on a lot. So what is it? Now, this is
I
what
don't,
like
he might have said that, but that's not what we're showing.
No, you said it. Okay, I'm just gonna.
Okay, it's the intent that every house will have,
intent.
am I correct, John?
Yes.
Yeah, every house will have its own
I'm
well.
just saying that in previous meetings,
Now, what Brian is raising is that he's saying that he has a concern as to the location of these wells. These are all the wells. And
It's
they
a
have
lot
to
of
be-
wells.
And they have to be a certain location distance, okay, to,
The septic,
so we have to provide that information.
okay. All right, but that's,
If not, if it isn't, then we gotta relocate the well.
right. So I guess then it was brought up last meeting regarding, like, here is the well here.
Yes.
That really restricts the access of this landowner to the back of his yard for any sort of major equipment going over as well.
No, why?
Well, I mean, usually there's something sticking out of the well.
Well, the well is usually, I mean, what's
Right,
sticking
it's
out
not
of the
there.
well.
They're out of the ground.
Or
yes.
pipe or
Yeah,
something,
I don't
it's
know
not.
what this distance is to the lot line, right? Is, right?
They're all different heights.
All different
Mine
heights.
isn't.
Mine is about that.
Mine too.
anyway, those,
They could probably use the other side of the,
So John, can you respond regarding the location of the septic systems on, if that's the right term, on those abutting lots as it relates to the wells?
Yeah, so we show the leaching field and the tank for each of these houses.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So we show the leaching field, the soil absorption system, and the tank for each house.
So how far are you away from that?
These wells shown here are minimum of 100 feet. So we had to move some of
50
them.
feet.
This radius shown here is 50 feet. We were showing that as, in relation to the septic tanks we have on our lots to show that we're
Okay.
50 feet from those, but
So-
they are 100
So
feet.
that's why I think, contrary to what your attorney has suggested, that maybe as the engineers are going, they should be able to talk between
Yes.
meetings.
Yes, but again, it's got to be,
Yeah, yeah, right.
okay.
Well, hold on, Roger. No.
Why can't the engineers, other developments we've done, and we've done a ton of them.
I talked to the chair,
Sorry.
so that's not how I do it.
Okay.
I'm hearing different things. Is there a response to the peer reviewer's report?
Yes.
Item by item, but you said it's
There
not
is.
complete, or it's
No,
coming later.
he wants yes, Brian just indicated that they still have some concerns. So a response, to answer your question, a response has been submitted, line item by item.
Which we received yesterday through
Right.
the chair.
Right.
Right.
We have not had a chance to take a
Yeah,
look
of
at
course.
that.
Correct.
Right.
So we need time to
Right.
look at that information. I don't know what it says. Because there was a lot of things that we identified as issues. I don't, I think John said that they were clerical and small revisions. I don't think that the things that we're talking about are clerical items. We're talking, Mr. Elias talked about a survey. We don't have a PLS that has stamped the plans. We don't know where the on-the-ground field survey was even done. There's no notes on the plan that says there was an on-the-ground field survey from so on and so forth. The plans actually say they're illustrative. Illustrative means a picture. The plans should not be illustrative. They should be defined enough, like what Paul was saying earlier, enough for you to be comfortable issuing the comprehensive permit. There are a lot of things engineering-wise that need to be addressed.
So a variation on what I said would be that an update from the peer reviewer, when they have a chance to review the response, they can update their letter, their initial, and sometimes the peer reviewer will say, this was the applicant's response, no further comment required. That's done, that's satisfied. Or we still have issues on this, or we disagree on that. So you want this in one place so that, you can see
You
it
can
back
follow
and
it.
forth, and then you keep narrowing the issues.
Right.
And the only thing I'm saying about, I don't like to have boards that I represent allow sort of a free-for-all between
Exactly.
your consultant and their consultant, or the applicant. And I'm not saying it's improper in certain instances, but usually you've narrowed the areas much more defined. In which case, then you say, yeah, it's fine, you can confer on that issue and we'll hear back from you. But I don't like a general
Like,
authorization between the applicant going with the peer review.
at our next meeting, when there's still some outstanding things, we can then grant permission for their engineer and our consultant to talk about point B,
That's the preferred,
C, and D.
that's my preferred.
Nothing
Yeah,
else.
but we're listening to this or reading this stuff ahead of time, like now,
Yeah.
like I made comments like he just said. We're gonna see that again. We're gonna see back and forth. I agree with our attorney. We should not be doing it over the phone
No.
amongst two.
No.
It should be public, right here.
Yeah, and actually, I think the process that we've engaged in thus far is exactly what town council is describing to the board. Everything is going through the normal channels. The peer review report was issued by MBL, Brian Dunn, and a line-by-line response with updates was just very recently completed and submitted, and the result is the updated plan that Brian has not yet had a chance to respond to. So between now and the next hearing, there will be an iterative response of that back and forth between the engineers that will be presented to the board, hopefully before the next hearing, so that you may have a chance to read it and prepare for the hearing and ask questions. I think we do have an opportunity now where preliminarily, MBL has identified some high-level issues. The feedback from some of the board members is very helpful. So if there's anything else that the board might want the engineers to look at specifically, I know calling out the appropriate setbacks to identified leaching fields is definitely an important issue. But if there's anything else that at a high level the board wants to see, I think now would be the time to continue that conversation. And then the engineers will engage in the common, well-known process of going through their peer review reports, which they're both very familiar with, and town council, it's exactly what he's describing. And I think from there, as we narrow issues, then it's certainly appropriate for the engineers on a specific issue to work to troubleshoot that together. And in some instances, it may even be appropriate for a single board member that might, have an engineering background potentially, and I don't know town council's position on this, but the guidelines for 40B and 40B as a whole generally encourages what we refer to as work session.
I read that. Yeah.
So to the extent there's some engineering issue that's come up repeatedly, and we might not be able to, fully vet it in the context of a public hearing, it may be appropriate, and it could be publicly advertised. Towns do it differently. It's not a quorum of the board, though, but it's a designee of the board, meets with both engineers potentially to help resolve those issues, and then that designee will be able to report to the board and say, I heard the concern from the neighbors, I heard the concern from the board during the public hearing. I was able to have an extensive conversation with both engineers. We discussed this issue in detail. Here is my thought, or here is my report to the board. And then you're hearing it from one of your own board members. But just generally, the process is proceeding exactly how it should proceed. There's nothing outside of the norm here. The standard back and forth between the engineers is occurring. The most recent report, what was the date on the report and the revision date?
February 13th.
So, what's the date? just to
13th, I
confirm?
think.
The stormwater is February 13th, yeah.
Stormwater's
13th,
and the
February
most-
13th.
The most
Well, no,
recent revision date on the
so
plan
it just-
Same.
is the 13th. All right, lucky 13th. So the plan before the board currently and in the possession of MBL is the February 13th revision. That's likely going to, to the extent, actually, we won't have comments before the next hearing, but I think the February 13th revision date will be discussed at the next hearing. We likely will have an updated plan set that maybe addresses those, and we'll probably present that at the next hearing to maybe be able to check off some additional items before then. So with that in mind, I think we've received feedback on wells, setback of features for the septic system. We heard some questions about survey. Is there anything else at a high level, having heard this preliminary presentation, or that at a very high level, understanding that Brian hasn't had a chance to, fully receive and review the 13th revision, but at a high level, is there anything that we would want to identify now? So we
Go
can-
ahead.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, one of the things I heard loud and clear was public safety issues. Part of the site plans, we have not seen any Westport fire truck apparatus turning movements through this subdivision. I would recommend or suggest through the board and through you, Mr. Chairman, that the applicant's engineer get the fire truck data from the fire department and prepare a fire truck turning plan for this subdivision. And add
Pretty
that to
common,
the set of
pretty
plans.
common.
Yep, we can.
That's not a
I
problem.
thought we sent this to the,
We did, we got
We sent it to.
I hear what Brian's saying, it's a common thing, we'll be glad to do it, but we did get comments from the fire chief. He was happy with everything.
Yeah, but having a formal thing with the equipment and the knowing the
Yeah,
size and the
The reason why I'm
radiuses.
asking for it, because the plans do not identify some of the radiuses of the cul-de-sac on the plan, or the turning, or the intersections, and what the radii of the curves, of the curbing are, and the pavement. So it would be a lot better to see that the truck turning movements are adequate for public safety.
Yeah, and already, just based on the original comments by our fire department, they've already changed some of at least the road going in, there was gonna be a bump out, and they changed something.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
instance.
in a very
the-
technical way,
The
they changed
turnaround on the vacant land to remain, there's a T intersection there, but there's no dimensions, it doesn't tell us. I mean, we can scale it.
Right.
Identify it, but it really should be shown on the plan how wide it is, how long it is, what the turning radius is for that pavement in that area, so it's clear to the contractor what they're going to build, but also to us and to you,
So that we-
that it meets public safety issues.
So we will do that, even though we still have a letter from the fire chief saying that it's okay, but we will do.
Well,
That's
there's a new
pretty-
plan, so.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard thing that we do in almost all subdivisions.
And are we contemplating that the peer reviewer is gonna review what's been submitted and then indicate in the report what's been resolved or what's still open?
Yes, we'll go through the same
But-
process we did with traffic.
Right,
No,
so
I wanna
again-
make sure the peer reviewer knows.
But Mr.
Yes, you have time to do it?
Yeah,
Make sure that-
we're going to April 2nd,
Yeah.
that's time.
All right.
Actually, if Chair doesn't mind, Brian, what would be the deadline for you to receive a turning radius plan in order to incorporate it into your report in advance of the next hearing? So that maybe we can add some structure to the schedule to make sure, if, there may be other things that we may want to submit. So what would be a drop dead for you?
Well, to get a response back, at least 2 weeks before the meeting.
How many?
2 weeks before the meeting.
Because the only way that you can start to narrow your areas is through your peer reviewer, narrowing it down
Yes.
for you. And so that really has to take place, or you're really wasting hearing time, so.
But I think one of the bigger things is the test pits and the soil data that needs to be verified. So through the chair, I would recommend that the applicant's engineer start to do some of that to confirm the soil data in these basins.
Right, and these are comments you've already sent to them.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, and again, I know MBL just received the plan. If you could just describe for the board and everybody what area in particular you're referring to as far as additional testing, and what testing you would recommend, and then we'll, hear the request to the board, and obviously we can troubleshoot in the interim.
Okay, so since this is the subdivision, also they have to file with the Conservation Commission, plus the town's regulations, we have to file everything, they should file everything that's in compliance with the stormwater rules and regulations and all the 10 standards, okay? One of them is that soil testing is required in every single one of these ponds. They're calling these ponds detention basins. So they're gonna hold water,
Right.
okay? But what we're saying is that the DEP's regulations requires multiple tests inside these basins, and we've got a handful of them, and they're not even located on the plan. We have no idea where these tests were performed, other than what was shown on the septic system in the reserve area. We don't know where these other ponds had tests or not, because they're not shown on the plans. So there is a requirement, I think it's like every 5,000 square feet, we're supposed to have a test, a soil test, go down the refusal, log the soils, and then make sure that your detention basin or your infiltration design is in accordance with the separations, either 2 feet or 4 feet, depending on the mounding. So, right now, we don't know where that test pit data is. There's test pit data further in the detail sheets that identify where the basins are, that they did these test pits, are sandy loam and loamy sand, which allows for infiltration. Even though they haven't quantified that in their drainage design. They're calling this stage storage, they're gonna have standing water in these basins, but I know that they're gonna drain down. We know that based on the soils. So if they design it as an infiltration basin, the basins can actually get smaller and not take up so much room. So that's some of the comments we had. So that's why I'm saying that there needs to be more test pits out here, and then we'd like to witness those test pits to verify what John and his office are doing.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just confirm, is that just for the basins you're asking for additional testing, or does it have to do with the septic as
It
well?
also regards to, we mentioned that in our letter, that the reserve area is lacking some test pit data for the septic system reserve area.
Yeah, but
You're
So-
required to have, per Title V, a certain amount of test pits per your field and your reserve area, and they're lacking that right now.
Okay, so, and certainly, those are appropriate engineering questions to ask. I think from a 40B perspective, there's a balance between the level of detail in terms of the amount of testing that's done at a preliminary level before we even know whether this board is inclined to grant a permit, and actually putting a shovel in the ground and building it. And certainly, everything that MBL is describing is appropriate pre-construction. There's definitely some dialogue that's going to take place between the applicant and the board as to exactly what the timeline looks like for that type of testing. Ordinarily, I would not expect that to be a pre-permit condition, that the board would say, we're going to stop everything, get an excavator out there, and go do test pits that Brian witnesses. But there may be certainly appropriate additional information to put on a plan to identify exactly where the existing test pits were done, what the results of those test pits were, and how they relate to the design. I think Farland designed this a certain way. I understand that if you're going to take into account infiltration, you could potentially reduce the size of the basins, but I think.
But are we proposing infiltration
But I
or-
think
or-
understanding.
No, we're not proposing
I know, but I think understanding the issue, we'll be able to present a report to the board to explain why we've done it this way, why we think this is the appropriate way to do it, and then it's up to the board to decide with the advice of their engineer, whether or not that's something the board would,
Right, Brian?
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with what Chris is saying, because there's a conflict in their design. They went with and said that they had D soils and C soils out there, and designing to the extent practical, it's in their drainage report. However, the test pits that they put on the plans say they're sandy loam and loamy sand, which means you're gonna have infiltration. So it's a conflict in their design. It needs to be confirmed.
understood.
I would think we would need to know, in order for us to approve this, I would think we would need to be confident that in fact, your retention ponds, however they're designed, are adequate.
From a preliminary perspective,
Well,
absolutely. MBL needs to be able to say,
Yes.
I have enough information that from a preliminary standpoint, I am comfortable that they can achieve final design and move forward. But beyond that, that's why, and again, we need to go back now that we're hearing some of these questions from the board and discuss exactly, whether it's a conflict, because he might have had a certain thing in his mind that didn't necessarily present a conflict, and that's why we're going to have some back and forth just within the development team as well. And if 2 weeks prior to the next hearing, we submit additional information to MBL, then Brian can digest that information, hopefully sooner. I mean, we can certainly submit reports and letters, that address some of these initial questions we're hearing. And I think to that end, that's very helpful. I mean, are there any other high-level initial questions that MBL is wondering about?
My concern from a developer's point of view is that, and Chris has indicated, it's a balance for the board to feel comfortable to a great extent, but yet it's not appropriate for the developer to go through all of the expense to design it to 95% standards without getting some indication from the board that, this looks like it's going in the right direction. That's
I
what,
think from what I've heard so far from our consultant, Brian, right?
Right.
That I feel that when he's saying it's sandy and loam and loamy sand or whatever, I see that and I just think the beach and it's just all gonna go be running through, but you're saying you're gonna hold it all in, I think that's a significant conflict that you're gonna have to resolve. And again, I don't know how
Yeah, but
one
I don't.
resolves that, because, again, I'm not a civil engineer or whatever type of engineer you'd need, but, you know, he's saying he needs more data, so.
Yeah.
So from a
we're not-
preliminary-
Basically, we want more data. I mean, that's the way I feel.
Well, I agree, but it's a balance, okay, as to, normally, like Brian was saying, every 5,000 square feet, the rules and regulations require a test. Do we do a test for every 5,000 square feet and spend all that money and time, and the board says, no way in hell am I gonna approve this damn thing?
Yeah, I think
That's
what
the
we,
balance.
what we aim to do, and one of the reasons, generally, when the detention basins start out, they want to show there's enough room. And if they're oversized, that's a good thing. So from a design standpoint, if we can show that it's feasible, and hey, we might even have the benefit of infiltrating to make it smaller, we will respond to that issue that MBL's raised. I think our job is to show it's feasible. So identify the conflict, but if the conflict is, well, we want them smaller, and we want to make sure that, you know, the standard is they have to be drained within 72 hours. But if the final approval from the board, if the board says, well, you've shown it's feasible, but we have a concern about the time period within which it's going to drain, which is, it's a common concern when you're detaining. So if that's something that we're hearing now, we'll identify that
I think
issue.
from what we've heard so
and-
far, I don't think it's
Yeah.
feasible. So you gotta prove to me that it's feasible, because from what our engineer is saying, to me, your design doesn't seem feasible.
I think
I wouldn't
it's
go
not
that far, but we
necessarily
don't know.
what,
Right.
Yeah, let me
means
let the
by
process
Let me
work
ask
its
the
way out.
engineer a question. My concern is, we have a meeting on April 2nd. Sounds there's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done. Will we, John, you're gonna have adequate time to get all the information that Brian is sort of suggesting? So we have to get that done
By the
if it's 2 weeks before April 2nd, so call it March 16th, 17th. So that's only gonna give us
3 weeks.
3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. Is that enough time?
I guess it would depend on when we get the next round of comments from MBL back.
No, right now, based on the comment, what he's saying right now on the testing that's gotta be done.
That's
and you-
already in.
And you know what has been done already. So is that gonna give us enough, can we respond to all the things that they're looking for by the middle of?
well, Paul, just to hold on
17th?
there. He's suggested additional testing. I think we need to go back. We've heard the concern about conflicts in the permeability of the soil and the design of the detention basin. We, as a development team, need to go back and figure out whether that's in fact a conflict, whether we have a reason that we did it this way. And so we don't know whether additional testing may or may not be the answer. So certainly additional test pits, you know, it's likely it's not feasible to do between now and the next hearing, but we'll have an answer on what our plan is at the next hearing. And then maybe between now and the close of the hearing, if we determine that it makes sense to do additional testing, between now and the close of the hearing, perhaps, we can do that. But we have to go back and determine
Okay.
exactly
I'm
what it
okay
is.
with
Doing egg testing in the ground right now.
Right. So we can definitely take that back. So wells, leaching fields, turning radius, the, you know, design of the detention / infiltration / wet basin, you know, anything else from a stormwater perspective, from well water that is a common theme that the board hears or that other projects in town have addressed that you might be interested in learning about here?
Anything else, Brian? That's,
Yeah, the other thing that, kind of popped up was the waiver request list.
yeah, then we were gonna talk about that, yeah. I mean, at some point, you're gonna have to go through all of your requested waivers.
Yes, and that always gets amended as you start going through the process and find more and more information. We could do, we should do.
Certainly, that's
we
not the next meeting, but at some point,
Oh,
we'll
yes,
have to go
yep,
through all.
yep.
of your
Updated waiver,
requested
yep.
waivers.
I agree.
And is Brian aware that the septic system is gonna be a denitrification system?
Well,
I'm not too sure, I mean, if it's
I think
over.
it has to be.
I mean,
no,
if
it doesn't.
If it's over, if it's under
been through
10,000
this before.
gallons
It's
a
on
day,
your plan
it
that it's
doesn't
denied.
need a denitrification.
I say that again?
No, the
Wait,
town
I-
requires it.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
That's a local.
Local rule, and
So
on,
you're asking for
So the
waivers.
state's going to override us on that.
Yes.
So this is the thing is you, as a board, you have to look at the waiver request and look at their justification. I haven't seen a justification of their waiver request. There are some waivers that are missing. So that means if they don't add to their waivers and you don't vote on them, that means they have to comply with them. So if there's a local regulation that says denitrification is required by the local Board of Health, and they don't ask for that waiver, that means they have to provide that.
That's correct, but at the same token, we don't have to provide justification. We could just say we're asking for a waiver.
Roger, this is now a conversation like we're having dinner and everybody's talking.
Yes.
And we can't do it this way.
Yes.
So, the peer reviewer provided a report, they responded to it. Peer reviewer is gonna have to report back, they can provide further information to him in the meantime. He's gonna have to supplement his report prior to your next hearing. And then you discuss what he sees are the remaining issues at that point.
Right.
If you have questions and comments at that point, you can do that. You don't, I don't agree with anything that was said about the standards of under 40B. If you have a local regulation and they're seeking a waiver, they need to justify it. And then you need to justify your decision.
Right,
You
yes.
can't just willy-nilly in the 40B process say, no, we're gonna deny that waiver, or we're gonna deny that request. You have to base it on legitimate local concerns that outweigh the need for housing. But you can't do that in the abstract. You need to know the concrete standard. This is, we need a waiver of that, and this is why we need it.
Right.
And by the way, none of the harms that are designed by this regulation are going to happen because of our mitigative measures that we're proposing to you. In other words, they justify it, that giving you a compelling reason why you should
we should
grant the
accept it.
waiver.
Right.
And then the 40B process, the only thing that is relevant to it is that you have the ability to waive something that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to waive.
Right,
No
right.
matter if they proved it or not.
Right.
So these conversations
I have
can't
one.
be had in the abstract.
Right.
Really has to be centered on that next report, and then it'll inform your questions and comments from there.
Right.
And the applicant's always free to say, we're not providing that. We don't agree that we need to provide that level of detail, or we don't need to provide this, or the reason we're doing it this way is X, Y, Z. And that's for the peer reviewer to give his final recommendations to you. I don't agree with that, or I do agree with that, or here's what the issues are. So it really has to be on that kind of concrete, see the report in advance and
Right.
then have the discussion. It really has to start to go through you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we don't have the applicants sitting at the table the whole time, maybe change the format a little bit so it doesn't just end up in a general conversation with 5 or 6 people talking.
I have a comment that every time I see this map here, I think, and I know that it has nothing to do, it's not something that you have jurisdiction over at this point, but at some point the state did. Maybe it's something I should ask the Concom, because you said that you just got a sign off on the wetlands. Is that correct? But is-
Not just, it was some time ago, but yes.
Yeah, okay, so when the first round of development started, I remember reading a document from the state that identified all of that area as a wetland, correct? And then, all of a sudden, about 10 years into it, that became part of that, like it opened up like the Red Sea. And so that there was this road that could be somehow brought in there on what used to be identified as wetlands, but then all of a sudden magically wasn't anymore. And so every time I see this, I just look at it and I'm like, how did that happen? How did it just like happen where now there, instead of one large wetland, now there's this one, and there just happens to be this road? How did that happen?
Well, I think what you're referring to is when the development was originally proposed, it was proposed for a 9-hole golf course with many houses. And there was a lot of wetland that then all of a sudden required MEPA filings. And the developer, and this is only a small part of the total acreage. So the total acreage was about 234 acres of land, and this represents how many acres? No,
25?
what is it?
25.
25, so it's a small part. So, yeah, so at one point in time, there was a map, and there was the golf course proposed, and a lot of wetlands, and NEPA, and there was endangered species
Yes,
issues,
yes.
a whole bunch of issues.
Right.
So the developer decided not, because of the MEPA filings and all the things that they were gonna go through, that most likely it was not gonna be, he couldn't, maybe not get that approved, so he abandoned that plan. That did not change the wetland over here. So there was, and that wetland that was on that plan is still there. It hasn't changed, nothing's been developed, so that wetland is still there on the remaining part of the, so whenever, if and whenever they go to develop any other section of the property, they're gonna have to deal with that wetlands there. So it didn't go away, it's still there. And the endangered species in that area, I think one of the species that was identified at that time got delisted, so that's no longer. So when I say we got approval, or the approval has been granted from the Conservation Commission regarding wetlands as it relates to this plan, not all of the other wetlands that's still there. I don't know if that,
No, thank you for
I think
clarifying.
that helps you. I don't know, hopefully.
Well, it does a little, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I was just like, how does that happen?
Right.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so we have a plan for what's going to happen next. Is April, what do we say? Second?
Yes.
Is that still appropriate for everybody?
I think so, and if necessary, and we need to have that extended for some reason, we can always ask for continuance and grant a waiver.
Well, we have to be here if we schedule the meeting.
Right,
When we schedule a meeting, we're here.
okay. So it's April 2nd.
Right. Okay,
6:30.
so I will make a motion then to continue this hearing till April 2nd at 6:30 in this conference room.
I second
Do I have a second? Discussion.
Yes. Can we change till 6 o'clock? Is that not good for everybody?
I mean, that makes it tough for people to have, especially people that did any traveling. I mean, getting a little bit of dinner would be nice before you come here.
Just have a late lunch, I agree with you. Let's do it soon.
You know, unless the applicants want to cater a little something for us.
$49.
Each.
So we have a motion, we have a second.
I second that motion.
Discussion amongst the members. Janice? Okay, now, is this going to be a problem? He wasn't here for part of the meeting. He was here for the remainder of the meeting.
Yeah, no, there's too many. He can't vote. He can continue to participate, but he won't be able to vote.
That's going to be a problem then. Okay.
Let's change it to
Why?
another date.
Because he can't.
What's that?
Why is that a problem, though? You have you still have 5 voting members.
Well, we have at least 2 or 3 more meetings to go.
Yeah.
Right, and Jerry's already missed
And
one.
Jerry's
He
already
was
missed
sick,
one.
and he-
Yep.
there's
And I'm
a
probably
chance
going to
that-
meet.
And
I think
she's
Jerry
gonna
might
miss
miss
We're
one.
going to get to a point where we.
You're going to miss the April 2nd one? Possible?
About 85%, yes.
Okay, so why don't we change the date?
But I probably will miss the 6th, the 9th as well, so I don't know if
How
it'll,
about the 3rd, 4th, 5th? Does it have to be on a particular day?
I'm going to be out
Well-
of town.
No, okay, but that whole time period?
I
Okay.
think so, I think so. I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Like I
So-
really like to have a vacation.
We typically go away.
I
I think
really would like to get out
I
of
think we're
town.
better off pushing it for another week.
Could we go April 9th?
Even worse.
Is that probably coulda, woulda, shoulda?
I'll definitely be back by the 16th, but I
That's,
don't know about
that's way too.
Yeah, it's too late. But I've got one out that I can do and watch
You
it.
can do one.
So that's all I'll do, unless
Okay.
I come down with,
Yeah, but I really don't want two people out the same day. That would be
Right.
problematic, right? Because then that's 1, 2, 3, 4,
It'll
and
make
then we're counting on Jerry because we don't even know Jerry's schedule.
Why don't we do the 9th?
9th. George?
Oh, it's,
I would prefer the 16th, but
That's
it's getting late.
starting to push it.
I'm okay with the 6th.
I mean, can we do as he suggested, an alternative evening rather than Wednesday? Is it an issue with the space here?
No. No, we
We can't
just,
do Mondays.
we just generally, we could
I
do
know.
Thursday.
But, because Mondays are select
Or-
board meetings.
our board
They're not-
meetings, right.
And they're in here, right?
I'll
I can't do
I'm
Thursday,
driving from
the
Kansas,
10th.
I'll be here.
What's that?
I'm driving back from Kansas, I'll be here,
By the 9th.
yeah.
Well, another day or two is not gonna make any difference. If it's easier for everybody, 10th or 11th, I mean.
I can't do
She
the
can't
10th.
be here the 10th.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so let's,
I mean, I schedule, I don't schedule
what
my
about,
Wednesdays straight.
Okay.
Attorney Pucci, is 9th okay with you?
What?
9th?
Yeah.
Brian?
April 9th?
That gives you another week to iron things out as well.
Sure.
That's okay
Same,
with
same
you?
with us, same with us, so.
Same with you. Anybody else? You have no idea.
Right, could be a problem.
Could be a problem, but hopefully it's only one, so. Okay, so I will amend my motion to continue this hearing till April 9th at 6:30 in this conference room. Do I have a second on that?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? No?
You were?
So that's unanimous, so we will continue this hearing, April 9th at 6:30, and at that point, we will review the engineering plans.
April 2nd is out.
April 2nd is out. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
we have
Meet
a
everyone.
little bit more business to work on. And Janice, can you,
Oh, 9th, yeah.
can you
Well,
and
7th.
Johnson stay with?
Listen, I need a
few
real
minutes after?
What, yes, yes, yes.
Did we do something bad?
Still have a,
When the principal calls you after class, what do you think? No,
I've been called to the principal's office before, but not.
no, it's about another,
Yes, right, yeah, yeah.
Uh-oh, ruh-roh.
so anyway.
it was in the report.
I'll wait till they sort of move out. Next order of business is meeting minutes for January 29th. Maria has provided meeting minutes for the 29th. She's promulgated to everybody. Everybody made comments. I make a motion to approve the January 29th, 2025 meeting minutes.
I second it.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. That is, are there any other business that need to be discussed? There's nothing going on now with, essentially with the articles that's still in front of the select board. It didn't come up at the last meeting, it hopefully it'll come up the next one.
So the fact that I didn't go, that was a good thing. 'cause
I know, I was gonna go too, we had a late dinner and I couldn't make it, and
Yeah,
it
something
didn't, nothing
happened that
came
night
up.
for me too. I was
Nothing came
like,
up.
yeah.
So, no other business? You're up.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?